Bruce, we're live?
Live and ready.
All right, call to order the May 22nd regular meeting of NID. Thank you for being here. Please join us in the salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please.
Division 1,
Here.
Division 2,
Here.
Division 3, here. Division 4,
Here.
Division 5.
Here. Okay. So now we're having public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Any? Debbie, thank you.
So, thank you again for your participation in our ag tour. I just have an interesting comment. We've all been living and breathing water and cubic acres and saving this and saving that since March. And I got at least a dozen comments after Jennifer's presentation, how much they appreciated hearing the science. And hearing the details, not just rumors or hearsay, et cetera, et cetera. So I really appreciated the people that took the time to tell me that. So I want to let you guys know that I really think it was worthwhile for me, of course, as a presenter, but NID as a whole, just based on my comments. So that was it. Thanks again. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie. Michael?
I too would like to express an appreciation for the board. It's been a pleasure watching you guys and Jennifer for the job that she does running NID. I did get a phone call from a friend of a friend that expressed some concern about Roundup being sprayed on her property, on a ditch on her property. And they called me, I was called, asked, what are the policies, what is the policy? And I said, I'm not really sure, I don't really know much about NID, and I don't really have a ditch anywhere near me. And my experience has been that you guys notify the raw water users before you guys treat either the water or spray ditches. And so she seemed surprised that she wasn't notified. And then it also seems from research that it's not publicly known that you can fill out a form and ask that people don't spray on your property NID. So I would just ask that in your billing or messaging that people get notified that they can opt out of being sprayed with Roundup, and that there is truly notification 4 days before treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we address this occasionally.
I bet.
It's on our schedule.
Yeah, I think when people show up in white suits, they're like, what?
Not quite, but no, it's a concern.
Thank you.
You have someone online.
Yeah, Jody Wren, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't have really anything other to say than thank you. I know all the big problems, the irrigation, the agriculture, all of that, it felt very much like recreation was dropped. It wasn't a priority at all. And I truly just wanted to say thank you for whoever did whatever. Somebody did something to fix things on Rollins Lake. And I just wanted to mention how extremely important recreation is to millions of people who work 40-hour days to just have a weekend off or to go fishing one time or anything, any kind of break from the world today. And it is such a privilege to serve so many families that have a tradition of renting a boat every summer, or who go camping, or the kid who just gets an ice cream. Whatever it is that's so tiny is so extremely important. And I, for one, so grateful that we get to have another summer to give that to so many families. So that's all. Thank you. And you won't hear from Jody Ryan until next summer.
Jody, I owe you a response, and you'll, sorry, Jody, I owe you a response. I'm not ignoring you. I'm waiting for an answer, so I'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. All right, let's go to anyone else. Public comment is closed. Let's go to the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have public comment on the consent agenda. I just want to speak out in public real quick. We're doing the tank at Lake Wildwood. It's costing now $447,000, where it used to cost around $2 million. So inflation, we're feeling inflation. So just want to point that out that, yeah. All right, no public comment other than that. Let's have roll call, please.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 3, aye. Division 4,
Aye.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 5.
Yes. Okay. General orders, budget to actual reports.
I will handle this one, President Johansson, from the standpoint that Sandra had her baby. So our finance director had her baby, he's about 10 days old now, baby Luke, and mom and baby are doing very well, so very exciting.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super cute. I'll share a picture afterwards. The item before you is just the normal budget to actual report for first quarter of 2024. Everything is pretty much on target. The narrative of the staff report outlines any things that are nuanced details that explain something that may not make traditional sense. As always, remember, a lot of times we don't experience revenues and or expenditures on a 25% basis per each quarter, and that is just the nature of how money is spent and money is collected. Property taxes received usually just twice a year. Sometimes there's a third true-up payment, and then also same with irrigation, water revenue. We do our billing in April, and then some of the big expenditures such as insurance payments or OPEB payments, they also happen one time per year. So it does kind of skew things. But with that, it's pretty straightforward. I'd also like to announce that we are on target for our audit being completed, probably in record time this year.
That would be great.
Yes, we are planning on bringing the audit forward to present it to the board in the June timeframe. So likely the second meeting in June, but we've had all of our preliminary field work done, and, you know, we're looking great. There's still little minor adjustments that are just more and more improvement. So I'm super proud of our finance team, our accounting staff. And with that, I will answer any questions you might have. Yes, it's been very exciting. The accounting staff has a very solid process now of reconciling on a monthly basis, which, as you know, in previous years, that was not occurring, and that always then delayed the audit. Because what would happen once it comes to audit time is they'd have to recreate essentially 12 years of financials and make adjustments. And a big way to tell how well a finance or accounting department is doing is based off of the amount of journal entries that have to be completed after year end. There are some that are just naturally going to always be completed related to post-employee benefits or capitalization of assets. So you should usually be under 15 journal entries. In NID's heyday, we were up over 80, 90 journal entries after fiscal year end close, and now they are back, you know, under that.
At one time, we were 124. Yeah, it was an unpleasant.
So things are very good. So the financials are much more accurate than you probably have ever seen before, and we're excited because what this will dovetail into is now going into the new ERP system, which staff is re-ramping back up, and we feel that we're in a much better spot to be successful with that project.
Well, I just want to commend you, Jennifer. This has all happened since you've been here, and you get the credit for that.
I don't deserve the credit.
Well,
Staff
okay,
deserves the
no,
credit.
but you, Jennifer,
It was your leadership.
your leadership.
Right.
It was more of a, I'm a little obsessed with it, so I like.
Well,
the
and we are
financials.
so grateful for that.
I told people, Jennifer can do a spreadsheet at the meeting and talk at the same time.
Yeah, but we have an amazing accounting team. We have our new accounting manager. She is outstanding. We have a lot of really, very diligent, detail-oriented people, and I'm so proud of all of them.
And if you want to pass those comments on to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to, add my 2 cents to, to the staff and to you, Jennifer. This has been a mental improvement in accuracy, and it's one of those things that lies kind of in the back room. As a customer, you never see it, you don't know it, but as a board member, it was extremely disconcerting to see the state of, you know, kind of affairs, and to see how far we've come in a little over 3 years is just kudos to everyone for the heavy lifting, the strategic thinking, and I mean, to have an audit, gosh, weren't we like,
End of the year.
yeah, we were the end of the year. It's like, whoa, we're like kind of out of sync with the state regulations in this area. So to be not behind, but ahead of what the requirement is huge. Anyway, kudos to everyone and their hard work.
Thank you so much. This was one of the reasons why I ran for office in the very beginning, because I could see that this organization needed extraordinary help. Not that I was the person to do anything about it, other than see it, point it out, shed a light on it, and then the board and staff took it.
So I was fortunate enough to come in after all this kicked off. I don't have anything to add, but great job, everyone, for doing what the company has done.
Right?
But I'm sure it was a huge uphill battle getting there. It looks great now.
Yes, it's great.
It's a sign of a well-functioning organization, one that's effective, efficient, and it's great. I mean, this is probably, for me, it is the primary indicator of how well we're doing. Besides getting water to everyone as we're supposed to. We're being more transparent. We're accounting for it.
I think it's
We've come
indicative
a long
of
way.
the other systems as well, like IT systems, because they're putting time and effort in having, you know, a 5-year plan, something beyond. I look forward to seeing it permeate throughout the whole organization.
Yeah.
And staff greatly appreciates the board's leadership. I know that sometimes these types of long overhauls can seem like they're taking too long, or we might not be completely forthright with exactly what we're doing. So we've appreciated your patience and your support, because I know there's been some financial commitment. But rest assured, we have confidence in the finances now. And one of the things we always say as staff is it's not our money. So it's imperative that we're transparent and that we are on top of it. And it used to keep me up at night, and now I sleep like a baby.
Me too. So much better.
Right. So we need to receive and file?
Yes.
I'll move, receive and file the budget to actual reports fiscal year 24.
Do we have oil?
Order one.
I'll second.
Okay. Any public comment on this? None? All right, roll call, please.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 3. Aye. Division 4,
Aye.
Division 1.
Yes.
Division 5.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make one more comment.
Yes.
Testament to the fact, there's no questions from the board.
Yeah,
I'm actually shocked that you don't have,
No question.
you're so into the details. I
I
thought
was
for a
just
second
thinking
you had a
Chairman was
question.
right on.
Well, in staff, we're good at learning, so now we know what questions are gonna be asked, we address them in the staff report.
Well,
Now I'm gonna have to look harder. I always realize, I know Karen's gonna have it.
Yeah.
to put context to that, it took 36, half an hour to an hour of questions prior, at least. And, again, well,
Yeah, and Jennifer, you did so much of the heavy lifting on this. I mean, I know you want to recognize the important work of the staff, and I admire that, and I respect that, because the staff did a lot of the heavy lifting and did a lot of the change involved. But it was really your leadership and willingness to take it on yourself. You designed the new approach too, which is not insignificant. That lays the foundation for everything else. So, again, just thank you so much.
well done. Okay. Go on to 5A, Brandon Sanders. Brandon, thank you again from PG&E to be here. We have, well, 2 weeks ago you came, you'll be.
That's great. That's great.
Meetings until this is.
Of course.
For that. Last time you were here, to recap, we had a June 18th date where Powerhouse 1 horn and the support pillars will be done, and we'll be getting water into the South Yuba Canal, about 350 second feet. And then we had a date of end of July, August 1st, for the repair of Powerhouse 2 and the South Yuba Canal, or the pipe. So how are we doing?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Chair Johansson, directors, good morning. Just for purpose of introduction, for those who may not know who I am, Brandon Sanders, Sierra Division Government Affairs, assigned to Nevada County as a liaison. I'll go through a few of my substantive updates, and then I do have some other feedback to provide you on some of the questions we've been receiving. But to begin, yes, we are working 24/7 at a safe and determined pace to bring Spalding 1 back into partial service. And it would be, I believe, to convey water through the Drum Canal, not the South Yuba Canal, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is the case. And that work is progressing. We're still very confident in that third week of June timeframe.
South Yuba Canal, we can transfer.
Yeah, my understanding is the Drum Canal has the option to spill into the South Yuba Canal.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll be spilling about 50 CFS over to the South Yuba Canal.
Yeah, so still very confident in that delivery timeframe. We're making great progress, very complex work and very tight confines, but that work is progressing well. We have no safety incidents on the work to date, which is always good. An update on the South Yuba pipe, which is another big piece of the equation here. And again, for those who may not have heard, that was destroyed in a landslide last winter, about 240-foot section of 50 plus or minus inch steel pipe. We have completed the slope stabilization, so all of the rock scaling, removal of dangerous rocks, trees, other potentially hazardous debris above the pipe, so that work is complete. We have secured the piping material. We are now beginning the process of constructing work platforms. For those who have seen imagery, very sheer cliff, essentially, not like you can drive a backhoe right up to it or anything like that. So we're working on building those work platforms. Another update that I was given today that I believe is appropriate to share is that we're going to be looking to do some concrete foundation work versus the stacked masonry in certain areas, just to provide, more resilient, robust facility on a going forward basis. So that has the potential to move us into the latter part of August. So that is the update that I'm sharing with you today. But I think in the end, it'll be a positive development because the structure itself will be far more robust and resilient to future impacts from natural causes.
That's on the canal itself.
That's on the pipe, the South Yuba pipe.
The newly sourced pipe is just a little bit heavier because it's thicker than the previous pipe, so they needed to make just an adjustment to the foundation so that's more.
Yeah, the wall thickness of the pipe is thicker, which is also good because that essentially makes it a stronger pipe anyway, so.
Completion date.
It's still gonna be in August, but we'll be looking at the latter part of August for that.
And we have updated water projections if the board so desires to hear those. Okay, we'll do it right after Brandon's done.
And so that's essentially the two main updates, and as I shared previously, we continue to meet our operations teams with your operations teams at regular intervals, providing information on scheduling and work progress and things of that nature. I'll go next to the question that I fielded last 2 weeks ago regarding the inspections. And so the direction I've been given is essentially that we're working to gather all of that information, and we are able to meet with NID staff at a later date to provide further detail on that, but I'm not in a position to disclose some of that detail in a public setting due to the confidentiality terms of our conditional operating agreement. So that said, we are willing to meet with Jennifer and her staff, lend some further color to that conversation as we finish gathering the information and have that compiled in a way that's relevant and applicable to NID's information needs. So that's the answer there. I know it's probably not the level of detail you were looking for, but I did carry that back, and that was the response I was given. So I would say look to your staff in the future for the outcome of that conversation once it occurs. And beyond that, I'm still committed to coming every 2 weeks. We're continuing to work safely and at a determined pace to get the work done. 0 safety incidents to date, which is remarkable considering the nature of the work and the confined spaces and whatnot. But just really proud of the team. They're all very dedicated to getting the work done safely and as quickly as possible. So that's my update. I'm happy to field any feedback or questions I can carry back to the team for a future conversation. Thank you.
So to summarize the 2 pieces of your report, first of all, so the repair on the South Yuba Canal is being pushed back. When you were here last year, it said August 1st. It's now the end of August. Is that correct?
Yes, we're just saying the latter part of August.
Around the 24th.
Around the 24th. And that is due to a bigger, thicker, heavier pipe needing a little beefier underpinnings.
That is correct, yeah. The wall thickness of the pipe is, I don't know the exact measurement, but it is thicker than what was previously there.
Right. And so did the engineers, so my question though is, did the engineers who ordered the pipe talk to the people who had the foundational pieces? In other words, it sounds to me a little bit like somebody ordered the pipe and it didn't really meet the specifications that were needed for the foundation piece.
I think the critical piece was the pipe diameter.
Right.
In order to go essentially build it back like for like as opposed to the temporary solution we had previously talked about. I know that there was coordination occurring, and as the designs were being finalized, it was acknowledged that, you know, there was a need to do the concrete footings in certain locations versus the stack masonry. I know that they've all been communicating. I think that was just part of the discovery as we began to finalize the design once we had the material in hand.
Then my second question has to do with the other half of your presentation, which is the request that I and other board members have made, which is to make public the investigations and the inspections that have been done all along the way, and so that we, the members of the public and NID, could see, okay, when were these inspections and what was the results of them, and was there cracking or spiraling or whatever it was. And so your answer, I'm just going to be clear, is that that is not something that PG&E is willing to share publicly, but you will give some of that information to our staff.
That is the plan, yes. And as I shared before, I mean, this issue was discovered through a routine inspection. The water being in essentially a place it wasn't supposed to be. So the inspection is essentially what identified the issue prior to a more catastrophic failure of the facility. So the inspections are occurring, but the level of detail that's being asked for is not something I'm in a position to provide. That'll be going back and forth between your operational staff and our operational staff.
And why is it that PG&E doesn't want the public to know this?
I don't think that's the case. It's really just a matter of the conditional operating agreement and the terms that NID holds us to and the terms that we hold NID to. It's just a contractual matter, is my understanding.
I have a question following up on the South Yuba Canal. Does the heavier pipe with the reinforcement that you're putting underneath, does that give us greater kind of safety or protection against a landslide or rock slide going forward? I mean, how does that engineering change affect the risk factor in that stretch of pipeline?
Well, it'll certainly be stronger, just given the wall thickness of the pipe and the enhanced footings. But the scale of the landslide that occurred in February, I don't really know that there's much that would have survived that, given the volume of material coming off that cliff.
The thicker pipe was sourced because it was available, as opposed to the longer lead time of the same pipe.
Okay.
Originally, you weren't gonna get something until September, right?
That was what we originally thought, because being in such an old facility, it's a fairly obscure pipe diameter. But our logistics and materials folks were able to find it, so.
So it's kind of a win-win, at least we get a little bit more protection. But
Yeah, it will certainly be more resilient, and we're, of course, updating it to, the latest design standards. Things were designed a lot more differently in the early 20th century versus now, so.
Are there, too early probably, but are there plans to replace the rest of the pipe with this better pipe?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I know that the inspections occur. We walk it all the time, and if there's anomalies or imperfections identified, then yes, of course, we would make further repair, but I don't believe there's a need at this point for any further work beyond that 240-foot section.
My only question, and maybe I'll reserve it if somebody has something on this, is about the second horn after season. Have we found anything else that is changing those schedules or the scope of the work?
I don't know. I don't think that anything's changed there. It's still gonna require an additional outage in the wintertime outside of irrigation season.
Yeah, from a construction perspective, the second horn should go more quickly and efficiently, just because will have benefited from the experience of completing the first horn. So at this point, we have heard of no additional schedule delays, but we have built in all of that information into our newest water projections.
Yeah, and I think that will, as Jennifer alluded to, happen more quickly because we won't have the issue of needing to repair the columns as well.
The
So,
columns are.
yeah, so that'll be done. So essentially, instead of having two complex tasks, you only have one to complete, so.
We have like a WAG number. I mean, it should be fairly easy. There's like 30 days-ish in August. Let's say 25 of them, we're not getting 50 CFS into Scotts Flat and 300 into the river. Do we know what those numbers multiply out to?
Yeah,
What do we lose?
we'll walk through all of it. We have a whole spreadsheet. Tor will come up right now, so you guys can see it. Are you done, Brandon?
I'm happy to hang out if there's any further questions or,
Public comment.
May I?
Yeah, all you need to do, here's the workshop. You can step up and contribute anytime. And it's not a public hearing, so we can respond, we can get answers to you, you can ask us questions. All we need is that everybody advances the discussion. Thank
Well,
you.
mine will be in pieces.
That's fine.
Okay.
And then, yeah, all you have to do is just step up. And,
Hopefully I can do this. My name is Kelly Buster. I am the founder and the president of Stop PG&E. Normally, our group would not be showing up to NID board meeting, but the word that triggered this was PG&E and infrastructure. As you know, now, by the utility costs, and now after listening to this gentleman's words 2 weeks ago, and him stating, yes, the ratepayers will be charged. For what? Something that they did not maintain. So we're gonna pass that buck again to us. You are absolutely correct in asking for their maintenance records. Get them inspected, or get them inspect them, because everything this company touches turns to, and we know what I mean. People are living without homeowners insurance. Why? PG&E burns down towns and files bankruptcy because Gavin Newsom covered them, umbrellaed it.
let's just keep it focused on.
I will, it's coming to NID, I'm sorry. So I'll skip all this part and go down there. We don't need elaborate commercials. We don't need to meet PG&E for coffee. We need them to fix their business. And Patty Poppy said they're leading with love. There's not one person in my group that fills out love with an $850 PG&E bill, a $1,000 PG&E bill, and now we're talking adding on water to that bill. We don't need this. We can't afford to live. There are people walking around in this group with lights on their neck because they don't want to turn on their lights because they can't afford that bill. We are in talks with San Francisco Water District, who is wanting to buy PG&E's infrastructure. They want to sever relations with PG&E. There is a possibility for Placer County to become a part of MUD, which is the water district in San Francisco. They have the money to buy this. We are in talks with the second in lead, who is gonna go to their board and their members and ask if they can buy Placer County, which would be a biggie.
Can you be,
Pardon?
define that? Placer County's a big county.
So it's gonna be all of Placer County that we're just in talks. It's not a for sure thing.
Are you talking Placer County's, PCW, their water agency?
The water
Okay.
and the utilities or electricity, yes, because that's what they are talking about. They want to sever it, and it's funny because the CPUC is in San Francisco. Let me see.
So I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Real quick. Don't you think local control of infrastructure and water and the watershed is a lot better than out of local, like a San Francisco group that really has no direct connection to our area?
Not yet. And what Joe Patterson and Senator Nilo told us is to come to these board meetings and talk to you about this in hopes of getting the community better service.
Okay, define that.
Better service?
Yeah.
Better service would be somebody watching the infrastructure and always maintaining it to where we, the people, have a fair. Now, the other part of that is, yes, we need to take money out of the politicians' pockets. So PG&E does contribute to that. And that's a normal thing in politics, to get all this money from different sources, including the people that are raising our rates. They give money. They gave money to Newsom to fight his campaign, $1.1 million. Okay, I know.
I would just say that I think Assemblyman Patterson's point of view is much more aligned with what was mentioned here,
Yeah.
which is having the city of Roseville implementation where they source their own electricity, much like the city of Santa Clara, do something like that for Rockland.
Yes, and that's our hope.
Yes.
I mean, we are
Not
talking
having
to,
someone in San Francisco do that.
well, we are talking to everybody. We're trying to open up communication and see what our best options are. Because like I said, my bill, I can't afford. I'm retired.
I feel for you, I understand.
You know, and there's worse. You've got a lady in this county that's got a bill that is $24,000. And she had to sign up for a payment plan, and her bill is just growing and growing and growing. Her payment is $1,000 a month.
So
I'll move on.
So we do produce, through our hydro units, enough power to power up 60,000 homes.
And we need more of that.
And that may not be common knowledge, but NID itself,
Yes,
our hydro unit is working very well,
and we want more of those.
and we need to have more local control.
Yes, completely.
So, guess I can't emphasize enough that NID is doing a great job on water delivery. We have a very complex, complicated system, probably the most complicated, and I do not see an outside entity
Being better.
managing this.
Any better?
Yeah. I think this community would suffer
if it changed.
Your talks go down that road.
I think that this board is in favor and has been for a while of increasing our energy production. So that's something we would like to do locally.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the transmission part goes with PG&E and the generation part, we have more control over. I think that would be a suitable
You
solution.
definitely need your own control.
Right.
You can't let somebody else control, you know, you guys need either.
For example, just what we're doing now,
Mhm.
I wouldn't expect a group to be able to go and have this conversation with any other board in San Francisco.
Correct. But we are hitting them. We are doing it. I mean, we are hitting it, so
Well,
we're just trying to bring light to everything. We need options in this country. Our voices need to be heard.
Appreciate the energy.
and the effort, yeah.
And bringing it here.
Trying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do
Thank you
need
for
more
being here.
local control.
Bye.
My name is Lynn Archer. I own a business in town, a laundromat, which is dependent on water. So I'm here to find out, are we going to have mandatory 30% cutbacks in June? Are we going to face, is that going to affect businesses? Are we going to face fines? What's the situation?
Where is your business located?
Grass Valley.
So and you're on treated water?
I'm in Grass Valley water.
Yeah, so at this point, we're only under voluntary reductions, and we'll speak a little bit more about exact numbers coming up, but we do not believe that we're going to, if the schedule holds, have to go to mandatory reductions. So I think that you'll be good for this, as long as everything stays where we think it's gonna be.
If everything doesn't, because of course, doesn't, are we going to face mandatory, and will that affect businesses?
Yeah, so with treated water customers, usually mandatory conservation is implemented in the form of rules. And most of those rules are focused on outdoor watering of kind of functional turf. So, or anything that's ornamental landscaping. So anything that has a, economic component to it, such as related to a business, typically isn't impacted all that much. It'd be more like rules like you can only water outside 2 days a week, you can't wash your cars outside, you can't wash up hard surfaces. Treated water customers respond very well to that form of implementation of water conservation, because we don't just simply cut the water deliveries to treated water.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna cut it, but I think you're gonna look at our bills and say you haven't cut 30% of your water usage, which as a laundromat, I wouldn't be able to, because I got a business. And then what kind of fines would I be facing? That's why I'm here.
Yeah, typically that's not how it's implemented, but if we are to ever go to permanent or mandatory, not permanent, mandatory water conservation for treated water customers, we would propose a plan to the board that the board could provide input on, but it wouldn't be likely that your business would be impacted.
Okay.
So I'd like to add something. So we actually voted as a board to have surplus water, which enables Grass Valley to take water from us. And I subsequently tried to reverse that, and the board did not support that. So we really have very little recourse at this point unless they brought something back to the board who already voted not to restrict the water. But folks like myself and other raw water users have voluntarily given up their water because of the situation.
Yeah, no, I understand, you know, you guys have been cutting, I guess, the water that goes to like the miners' inches of water or whatever, yeah.
What goes to our livelihoods.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, right, oh, yeah. No, I've talked to people who are in my laundromat because they weren't able to hook up to the water this year, whatever. But I need to know whether I'm gonna lose 30% of my business, whether we're going to be fined, because if people have to cut out 30% of their usage at their home, they're going to be doing their wash at my laundromat. Do I close the doors 30% of the day? I mean, that's
We should get you more water if that happens.
Well, that's what I'm trying to, that's why I'm here, trying to figure out if you guys have a plan in place, what the plan's going to be, what it's going to cost us. Have we not thought about any of that, or, I mean?
We voted on it twice.
Oh, no, we haven't
To
voted
not
on
restrict your water.
Right, yeah, I understand you've got restrictions in place right now that are voluntary. what is the target if they don't meet it, which who knows? Is that the middle of June? Is that going to be August? Because it sounds like it's August now.
Maybe Jen could respond.
Yeah,
Jennifer,
so Director Calder brings up a very good nuanced point that I failed to mention in my original response.
Yeah.
Because you pay your bill directly to Grass Valley.
Yeah.
We would not be implementing any restrictions on you, the city of Grass Valley would. So they would have their own, they essentially mirror our percentage of reductions, which they did by taking a resolution forward to their city council. And if we were to go to mandatory conservation requirements for treated water customers, it is likely that staff would present to the board for feedback and consideration a list of rules that would have to be followed. So we would not be finding you. I cannot speak to how Grass Valley would implement their plan, but I do recommend that you reach out to the city of Grass Valley.
Okay, so you guys wouldn't be setting those.
Not for within the city limits.
Okay.
and I would also advocate that you have an essential business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
We
agree.
do have an essential business that people need, and this is why I'm here.
Yeah, and
Every my day.
you're probably a lot more efficient and effective on your use of water.
Right.
And I think that's a great argument so that you can keep going in business.
With all of the droughts that I have been through really and have had to implement conservation rules, I have never seen any rules specific to any dry cleaning business. It's more been, as I stated, focused on outdoor water use.
Yeah, but this is like a different situation where, this isn't like a typical drought. This is infrastructure affecting all of us, water delivery. Sounds like might be kind of severe. And so this sounded a little different than a drought. That's why I'm here.
And I think what might be helpful is if we go through the numbers. I think that might provide a little
I
context.
think June 18th is more of a target date. That date is June 18th is the hard line we need.
And we'll talk about that in detail.
If I could just chime in on that, to get this in perspective. It's recognized that treated water is 10% of our water sales, the rest is all egg water. And then if you were here 2 years ago, when we went through the drought, we had days we could water. Some of us were in favor of going to 30%, and our general manager said, no, 20% will work, and it did. Okay, so that's right where we are right now. That's something, I mean, I liken this to a pretty substantial drought situation, and businesses didn't suffer during that time. And treated water users, they were asked to water on certain days and that kind of stuff. But we spend a lot of time each year going through these scenarios, and in fact, they'll probably have a what-if scenario.
A new what-if.
They need to have a new what-if just for this very question.
I have a comment, because I want to address your concerns about fines. In my term here, I've not seen fines associated with our drought declarations. Can you speak to whether or not there could be fines or how that would be implemented?
Yeah, they are, good question, Director. They are included in some of your prior resolutions as a tool,
Okay.
enforcement tool. But to my knowledge, we have never had to actually go that far.
Right, that's what I was going to suggest, but I wanted to hear the history.
Yeah. Occasionally, you'll have, a customer that is watering on the wrong day, or, has a sprinkler that's shooting 10 feet in the air, and, staff does a good job of contacting that customer and working through the issues before it gets elevated to the point of a potential penalty. But, so customers have been, to my knowledge, very responsive.
For the most part.
Wouldn't a resident or business in Grass Valley be insulated from that anyway?
They would be fined by the city of Grass Valley. Yeah, we would have nothing to do with that. I have, even in the last fairly severe drought in 2015, although I was at another agency, I think we issued 2 fines, but it was for extremely egregious actions. And they had been counseled and talked to and warned, 10 times before a fine went forward.
So that was my sense, that fines are probably not anything for you to worry about.
You're a patient man, Brad.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, board and staff. Brad Fowler. I just have a question on the, a landslide, and I just got to thinking about this. If this is what we would call an unanticipated vulnerability of this pipeline. So I'm curious, since we've already cleared the landslide above this and we're hopeful that it doesn't happen again in that neighborhood, is there anything we're doing to mitigate landslides in that pipeline area in the future so that in 5 years, the other chunk of the mountain doesn't fall off? Is there anything that can be done about that? I'm just curious.
Sure.
Nobody expected a landslide in the first place. What are we doing to prevent that in the future? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. Just generally, over many decades, there are multiple instances where land movement has destroyed portions of the canal. It's not something that is unique to this particular situation. Every time we build it back better. You know, I can't really speak to those portions now owned by NID, but I do know that prior to that purchase agreement being finalized, I think it was over somewhere off of Chalk Bluff where there was another landslide that destroyed a huge section of it. So I can't ever guarantee it's not gonna happen again. It's just the nature of the topography where the system was built back in the early 1900s. But I mean, we certainly complete inspections. We have geotechnical experts that are identifying risk factors and risk locations. There's no guarantee I can give that it can't happen again or won't happen again, just given the topography, so.
Yeah, I think that this particular slide is more related to a large rock slide that was more on the surface. Some of the other slides, such as on the 8.5 mile slide, that was a subsurface landslide that you wouldn't be able to even know was there. But the pipeline is inspected all the time. I know we inspect the canal. We're also taking advantage of this current outage, doing extra work out there. So based off of the age of the system and the extreme terrain, it is an inherent risk within that system.
I would say we've removed a large volume of potentially hazardous material uphill of the pipe section, so.
Yeah, they've been completing a lot of rock scaling, and yeah, that's intended to pull anything that's potentially loose off the surface before it falls.
And that's above that, I'm sorry, that's above that whole section of pipeline, or is that just specifically where it already fell off?
I believe that there's been it's worked out to the edges.
Okay.
Not the entire pipeline, but I know that we've looked and surveyed and identified the most hazardous spots and identified those and worked them. But there's no guarantee anyone can give that it couldn't happen again, just given the topography.
To that point, Kean was out a few months ago checking during a snowstorm, that Chalk Bluff area, I think, right? And the South Yuba Canal, because we check it all the time. And he had to take the Tucker Snowcat out. A lot of good things came out of that, so.
You mean you didn't ski in?
That'd be great.
But we check it all the time. We call it the flume of doom. What do you call it?
Yours? Yours? I'm sorry. Trying to bring a little levity to the conversation, but,
Michael?
Hi, I appreciate again the opportunity to talk. I'd like to make a comment from being a general building contractor and having some knowledge of concrete. Concrete piers, in general, after they're poured, you can't put any weight on it for almost 2 weeks. So 2 weeks added, probably added just from not being able to put weight on the actual concrete. I just wanted to offer that from a constructive point of view. I do have some concerns. I'm hearing that there is some I guess rumors maybe that PG&E is looking to you guys to pay half of the cost of the repair. And I guess one is a question, is that a rumor or not? And two, if it is indeed something that they are exploring for being compensated for half of the repair, it seems to me that PG&E should have 100% transparency on its record with the pipeline over a long period of time so that so that's transparent. So that's a question. And then the last part of it, which is what I bring forward each time I come here, is my concern for the community and recreation. And I guess it seems to me that we're at a point now that we can be really super clear where we're going to be at the end of June and July with water levels in both of the reservoirs. I think if you haven't already, being explicitly clear with the county where we're gonna be, so that the county, I will talk there the next board. I didn't have a chance last one, about the importance of recognizing we have a county emergency, possibly, that should be being addressed at this point right now to help those people that are in the recreation business on the lakes and trails and all that. So my recommendation or my ask is, you know, that we should have clear levels at what point during the summer, so that people can make clear decisions as to their losses and then start working on getting those compensated.
You're asking for a county declaration of emergency?
I will be, yes.
Yeah.
And I understand that you guys, that was possible a long time ago from your guys' position in communicating with them. And I will ask where we are with that process with either OES or the CEO, you know, and try to make sure that we are moving forward, anticipating clarity on where the levels are exactly, like when the first boat ramps are not available, and, you know, and so on and so forth. And I think we should have pretty clear.
March 27th, we declare water shortage.
Yeah, so we made a declaration. We have been in constant communication with the county, and if we get to the spreadsheet, we'll go over the numbers. I promise you. So we have the numbers, we're constantly working with recreation. And one thing, and I know I've stressed this before, but this is a very dynamic situation, and our projections are largely based off of the weather, how hot it's been, how much water people are using, how much more in-stream flows we're getting from snow still melting from the sheds that can still get into Rollins and Scotts Flat Lake. So Tor has done an amazing job of continuing to update the numbers. We can communicate with the county on a weekly basis. So I think all the lines of communication are open, and we can talk about impacts to recreation if the board so desires. So we'll pull the magical spreadsheet up.
I actually truly believe that on your end, you guys are communicating perfectly. My concern is what the county's doing with the information, and are they gonna drag their feet in creating possibilities for people in the recreational business to not have financial consequences that take years to get compensated for. Like, let's start now.
Craig, maybe you want to speak to your conversations. Craig's been taking the lead on
So
it.
we've been talking to the OES quite a bit on the levels of consideration that they go through for a process in order to create a county emergency. They create a county emergency. I don't know all of their considerations yet. It is a larger consideration than just a handful of businesses that might be impacted based on a recreational component that is a very subset to a much broader consideration for a county-wide emergency. So I can't speak for OES completely. However, we are in constant communication with them. We have talked to them about the fact that, you know, our emergency steps up a larger consideration once we if we ever hit a mandatory water reduction component, which we are not at yet. And so there is a series of processes and protocols that the county OES goes through and considerations that they go through in order to make that declaration. It is not done lightly. It is not done without a broad set of considerations and board and council determinations. So I think that there is, like Jennifer says, there's no short, we don't feel that the county's just pushing this off. They are clearly cognizant of our consideration and of the comments that have been made at this board over the last few months. And they're watching it, and they're working with us, and if it comes to a point where there's ever a much broader emergency, then they are identifying these considerations. So we can't force the issue, right? Let's put it that way. NID cannot force the issue that they make a countywide emergency for this consideration.
Being very appreciative of your guys' board doing these workshops, I have asked now for our board of supervisors to look at doing a workshop in reference to the issues with the water, as well as a separate workshop talking about home and fire insurance, that there's more public input, So I will ask for a workshop similar to this, so that people in the community can express what they need to our own board of supervisors. Again, I appreciate you guys very much.
Right, we have a variable here that's gonna dictate the true impact that we just don't know, and that's gonna be the winter, right? If we have a light winter, next year's gonna be the problem. I think right now, the outward posture is, we're gonna be okay for this year. And I don't wanna speak for other government boards, but they might be hearing that as, okay, we're okay for now. But if we have a light winter, it's not gonna be good next year. And maybe that's when OES gets involved.
I do know there's some dollar thresholds that are at the federal government. If it goes from Cal OES, County OES to Cal OES to FEMA, there are some high dollar thresholds that are met with large scale wildfires, with large scale, county-wide considerations. I don't know the dollar amounts are somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million for FEMA or something along those lines. A tenth of that is sort of county-wide. Those are some of the numbers that I believe I've heard. Don't quote me, and if Paul's listening, I could be wrong. But they are in a high dollar volume, which is part of the consideration that the county looks at in going through. It's not the only consideration, I would say, but it's certainly a level of effort.
It appears that there's a general consensus that we will have a low water year next year with the changes in the El Niño or El Niño, or I guess La Niña. There is some general expectations that we'll have less next year than this year. Thank you very much for your time, guys.
Thanks, Michael. Probably not time. Yeah, Brent.
If I may, for Mr. Fowler, so I have colleagues that are listening in, and I was just sent a text that, yes, we are proactively removing rocks along the entire pipe.
Outstanding, thank you. Good move, good job.
Yeah.
I'd love to see the helicopter do that.
I know.
We have an engineer, I just don't see how that works, but I would like to see a video.
Yeah, I think some of it is people on the ground.
They drop the people there to.
I would imagine there's some of that, and then some lifting out of debris.
I want to be on that helicopter.
That makes one of them.
She gave me the snake eye.
Okay.
Spending public area.
Any more public comment? And I have one quick question. Do we have an assessment yet, Monica, of how we're doing recreationally?
So let's pull up.
We are gonna
Pull up, we actually, Tor just informed me, he distilled the information down into a very nice graph. So let's pull up the graph and then we'll talk.
Okay.
Tor, come on up. I will show my spreadsheet to myself then. Okay. So as I said, one of the most complex parts of this whole situation is that, well, there's a lot of complex parts, but a very complex part is that specifically with the Rollins projections, is that a portion of the storage within Rollins, 10,000 acre feet, is actually dedicated to PG&E. Through various contracts, both NID and PCWA have abilities to purchase that water, that 10,000. And so what this means is that PCWA and NID, we coordinate, and PG&E, minimum of twice a week, a lot of times a lot more than that, on how to best distribute that particular 10,000 acre feet. And it's a lot dependent on how much PCWA pumps out of the American River. So we have requested, and they have been maximizing pumping out of the American River to alleviate having to draw on that 10,000 acre feet. So we'll start with Rollins Reservoir, and these are projections, they're storage projections, elevation projections.
Can I ask a question about the pump?
Yes, sir.
So we're asking them to do that. Help everyone out. Are they gonna ask us to pay for part of the fuel?
No, it's more to help themselves out. So when it gets.
We're not on the hook for.
No, when it gets to that 10,000 acre feet, we have rights to 5,000 acre feet. If they didn't pump, they would be hitting a shortage at some point, probably July timeframe. So when Tor goes through these projections, which he's constantly updating, we are very conservative in our demand numbers and delivery numbers. And the reason being is we want to make sure we always have a buffer and we're not gonna run out of water. So I'm gonna let Tor, the water supply master, give us an update.
Good morning, board, staff members, public. Tor Larson, Water Resources Superintendent, and I'm going to go over some of the projections here for Rollins and Scotts Flat based on the many communications we've had with PG&E and PCWA. And so let's jump into the Rollins forecast here. As you can see, end of May here, we're looking pretty good. We typically, in the summertime, maintain a reservoir elevation of a minimum of about 60,000 acre feet to 64,000. That's what our public's used to seeing all summer. And then we get into the September period, there's a typical outage schedule that goes on, and Rollins begins to drop heavily. Average low point is about 40 to 42,000. It hits right about beginning of October, and then it rebounds again after that. So that's a normal situation for Rollins. What we can see here is obviously an early decline through June. So we're going to see some impacts coming in June. All boat ramps look to be in. And as Jen mentioned, we do a conservative estimate on demands. So these are average demands on a typical season. We've had great response from our customers in conserving and reducing water purchases. And our distribution operators in the field are doing a really good job making sure there's no excess in the system. So I think we'll come in ahead of it, but this is based on average situation. And you can see at the end of June, we get down into the 47,000 acre foot range. So we're going to be pretty low for what people are used to seeing. You see a lot of mud line at Rollins, but it's still usable. It's a very steep canyon reservoir, so there's still going to be recreation available. Once we get into mid-August, end of August is where we're having problems. So the first boat ramp that's going to come out is Peninsula. That's the highest elevation for where the boat ramp extends to, so that'll be the first to come out. And then based on these projections, it looks like Long Ravine will be right at elevation through the month of August and into September. At the end, you see an increase. The reason for that is because there's an annual outage on the Bear River Canal that takes water from Rollins. So once that outage happens, water will still be imported into Rollins. So we will see a remarkable climb over a month period. We don't see it all here because this is just through October, but they're not definitive dates yet for the second horn, but sometime mid-November range. We're looking to, stop imports and begin work on that second horn. We should see higher numbers than 50,000, probably closer to 55,000 by the time the outage starts. So we should have fairly good water supply in Rollins heading into the second outage.
What's the typical water storage that we would see in Rollins let's say end of December? What's the typical storage we're at?
Typically, it can vary a little bit based on weather, obviously, but typically we'll see somewhere in the 50 to 60,000 acre foot range.
So we're not that far off.
Right.
Okay, well that's wonderful.
The one thing here is that if we don't have weather, we'll be going back down, right? Small demands, but they are small. Until we get weather coming in, we'd be reliant on Rollins.
During that outage period, where's the inflow coming from? It's coming from the other reservoirs?
Yes, it is. Yep, it's coming from the upper reservoirs, Jackson Meadows, Bowman, all of them moving water as we typically do through the system.
Does anyone have more questions on Rollins before we move to Scott?
I'm sorry, can you explain again, that increase starts at the end of September, and that's because the system has been repaired and you're getting that inflow again?
No, water is coming in. These estimates are conservative. We started with July 1. It's, late June. conservative, we're using July 1 for imports. What it is reduced demands that time of year, and there's an outage on the Bear River Canal that's on the downstream side of Rawlins, so no water will be going out the Bear River Canal for a month period, and so demands will really drop to about 30 CFS in-stream flow minimums below Rawlins for October 15th and on until the second horn outage begins.
That's a normal outage, right?
Yes, that's an annual outage that's done every year. The Bear River Canal outage typically runs October 15th to around November 10th, November 7th range.
Assuming we'll take this scenario for the plan for water, and when we look at the three alternatives, we would see how those alternatives would affect this.
That was not the plan, but we can.
That's not the plan.
It's essentially, I mean, we can. I don't know that you would still see the same impacts on how we're showing it without this particular level, but we can.
We may not gain by looking at this.
We could do it. Let me talk to the modeling team and see how difficult that would be to run it. It's just making some adjustments to year-end elevations.
Because we're looking, I mean, Chris said it, we're looking at maybe more regulatory, and this is the more infrastructure repairs, but I think we might be looking at more of that down the road.
So remember, we did run the unimpaired flow scenario through the new model, and that shows way more drastic results than this.
We use that.
I think what would be interesting is, like, if the first horn's not fixed for an extra month, what does this look like?
So you're asking for like an August 1st import date?
Whatever that means.
A month later. Right now we're
If PG&E
projecting
says the date just went out a month
month
for that horn to turn on, what does that chart turn into?
We'll take a look at that. Right now, this has a 2-week buffer built into it, and we can build in an additional buffer.
The date is still the 19th of June for the first horn to be repaired. There's potential it could get bumped out, so we took a conservative July 1 approach.
Okay, now I understand the July 1 date. Gotcha.
But to be clear, PG&E is holding to the.
As far as we know. That's the latest update.
I love his non-committal. Smart.
Well, now, wait a minute. I asked you in the last 2 meetings, are you certain of the June 18th deadline?
Me?
No, him.
Oh, you're looking at me. I'm thinking him. I don't know. That's what
So
I
Brandon,
was told.
rather than just shake your head for the purposes of all these folks who are out here and online, are we still holding to the June 18th?
We are very, very confident on our ability to deliver on that timeframe, yes. Very confident.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
I think Jody, who called in earlier, this is what she's looking at, but what happens if it's later?
Right, so if it's later, then those boat docks are impacted earlier.
Early.
Yeah.
She's the one that has the concession there.
Yeah, she's the concessionaire for NID, so she has a contract with NID to operate, what is the boat rental?
In the restaurant.
In the restaurant.
Yeah.
So we are trying to be, as the situation changes, if things are better, then we're making really fast adjustments. Okay, boats can come out, we're not pulling them, we're trying to be facilitating on the ground to minimize impacts as much as possible.
One last comment just for future, since we're not in the details every day like you, I'm sure you know the average. It'd be great to have like a 10-year or historical average on this. When we see, for our.
Let's go to Scott's Flat real quick.
Okay, this is the projection for Scotts Flat. I extended this one out to the start of next irrigation season because there's a lot less variables involved. So I could give you guys a pretty good look as to what the potentials are in a range of scenarios for next year. So what those scenarios cover is a wet year, which I took 2017, which was an extremely wet year. I took a extremely dry year, which was 2021. And just for some numbers, there was 90,000 acre-feet of natural in the Scotts Flat watershed in 2017. There was 7,500 in 2021, and our historical average is 33,000. So the green line is our average situation if we get an average year. And again, these are also based on historical average demands through the system. And we can see that the Cascade Shores boat ramp comes out sometime in mid to late August. So it will be out of the water at that point. The main boat ramp on the north side is projected to stay in water and usable through the season. For comparison, in 2015, we got down to 18,200 acre-feet in Scotts Flat. So right now we're looking around just under 25, so 24,500. So we're better than that situation right now. This is taking into account that we are going to spill water from the drum system, bring it into Scotts Flat, and then September 1st was a conservative date to bump those flows up. Once the South Yuba pipe became repaired, we can add additional water solely for that. That will also benefit Rollins, and then focus that full 400 going to Rollins Reservoir. So that's what these numbers project, and they're based on the different wet, dry, and average scenarios.
Thank
And then
you.
also, you gave that extra 2 weeks, this is July 1, is that, as you did for Rollins? It's about 7 days on this one. Oh, 7 days, okay, granted.
I think August 24th was what was stated, potential for slippage. We just used September 1st.
Thanks for doing this tour. It's very helpful and makes me feel a lot better about next year, knowing kind of the parameters. So that's.
One note for the dry year, if it is dry, we would absolutely be importing more than we typically do. So that's a conservative number. A safe estimate would be another 4,000 to 5,000 acre-feet over the course of winter. If it was dry, we felt it was safe to move that water through the South Yuba Canal system, we would do that. So there's potential for even better scenario under a dry condition.
You're talking about importing our water.
Yes. Yeah, it would be pulling from Bowman and.
Two questions. Define dry.
So on a dry year, I used a recent, one of the driest years that we've had of 7,500 acre-feet of natural runoff into Scotts Flat. That equated to, I think it was like 34 inches of rain when we typically have 69 up at Bowman.
Right. And then we can, if you're maxing out the South Yuba Canal, it's 150 acre-feet a day.
We probably wouldn't do that in winter. Normally, our typical winter operation is we'll bring in 35 CFS at the tail end. We have to put a little more at the head for losses, but we would probably try to increase that by 10 to 20 cubic feet per second through the winter to improve storage at Scotts Flat.
For, I could be mistaken, but on your Rollins analysis, I didn't recall you doing the wet, the medium, and dry year analysis. I'm wondering if we could see that at a subsequent point.
There's a lot of challenges with that one because there's so many variables on that side that I don't have answers to yet. I can say, though, that while the second horn schedule is not set, if we come in back to service in mid-February, which is looking conservative on initial discussions, we would be able to, without any precipitation, increase Rollins storage by 30,000 acre-feet before irrigation season just with imports. And that would be only using the 400 CFS that we're currently using, not the full range that it's capable of. So there's less concern at Rollins than Scotts Flat as far as, getting it full for next year.
Questions?
Second horn is the biggest issue for refilling Rollins. The completion of the second horn.
Yes, and tracking natural in Bear River would be a challenge based on all the imports. It hasn't really been completed for average year conditions and so forth. So it would take a little bit of work to separate imported flows, calculating out, you know, changes in storage and what natural actually was in the Bear River system.
And just of the variables, not everything you do. The biggest impact to refilling Rollins is probably the finishing of the second horn. Like if that doesn't happen, there's a major impact to Rollins, or you still have other mechanisms?
Well, if that doesn't happen, I would hope we'd be able to still use the 400 CFS through the one horn.
Okay.
If it does happen, then we have the full range. I think it's like 840 CFS that the canal can hold. So there's significantly more water that can be brought into the system. There are other things going on upstream that give us confidence that there's ample water supply that could be brought into the system if necessary.
The PG&E repairs to Fordyce, when are they scheduled to be completed?
I don't have that information, but I can ask and come back with it.
And we have a call getting scheduled, I think it's for Tuesday of next week regarding Fordyce. So staff also will have some additional information related to that project.
I apologize, I've not been involved with that one, so.
That affects us.
Sure.
It's anticipated next year is another year of work. I don't know the full schedule like Jen mentioned, but we would anticipate they're going to draw down Fordyce again next year.
Any other questions, public?
Does if we only have the one horn functioning, as we're looking to refill Rollins and we need to pull more out of storage, our storage, does that affect Jackson Meadows and Bowman's recreational aspects for 2025?
If the winter is dry and we use more flow over the winter months to bring in to help, yes, that would affect Jackson Meadows and Bowman as far as a carryover at the end of the year. We anticipate that those will be above average this year due to the situation and not being able to move it until later in the year. So it kind of hedges against a shortfall up there.
Things to look at.
Good news is, because we can't move, we're storing.
The bad news becomes the good news up there.
Yeah, we're topping everything off as much as we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it.
Off topic, how are reservations at Boucherie? They're booked.
Yes, solid, yeah.
That's with a price increase, right?
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely a stunning place.
Beautiful.
We're going to Fund 15, Doug, and Water Capital and Fund 55, Hydroelectric.
So we're done with the PG&E item. Okay.
Unless you got another spreadsheet.
Yes, for questions?
No one left my spreadsheet. Okay.
Directors, thank you very much. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina. See you in June.
I'll be here.
So this is kind of a very slow burn kickoff to the rate setting process. And what staff is presenting, does that make sense? The purpose of this item isn't to request approval for anything. It's just simply to talk about what our methodology is for setting a 5-year capital program and to start to introduce it to the board so that we can also understand what questions you have, what additional information you're going to want, because eventually the 5-year capital program will come to the board formally for approval some months down, and then that will feed into the rate setting process. But we really wanted to give the board as well as the public an opportunity to start thinking about how we're looking at 5-year long-term capital needs. And one thing that is important to note, and I got a couple questions for our board members, is kind of how does this play into the annual budget? And then how does this play into master planning and all the work we've been doing through the Plan for Water? So as the board is aware, the Plan for Water is intended to now then tier into master plans for raw water, treated water, hydropower, and then kind of watershed recreation. And those master plans, those are long-term planning documents that take a long look out, 20 to 40 years out, of larger infrastructure improvements that are needed for the system. Then after that, once you have master plans, then you use these 5-year capital improvement plans to then feed into rates so that we can understand what revenue we need to recover in order to build the improvements. Then on an annual basis, an annual capital improvement program comes before the board that is then adopted and then rolled into the budget, and that's what guides our expenditures for the year. Now, one of the things with master planning and even a 5-year capital program is that they're not exact. You know, there's never going to be a time in history where you could go back to any particular year and say, yes, we built exactly everything that was in the 5-year capital program. Year 3, we built exactly what was shown on year 3. And there's a variety of reasons for that. The biggest one is that we have an extremely large system and things break that we did not anticipate to break, whether it be from a natural event or something just happens. Or projects take longer or less short than they did, something else becomes a priority. But this is our guiding tool to help us through the rate setting process. Or COVID hits, yeah, as we're still dealing with delivery delays on materials. So this is just the start of it, and one of the also the things that you go into the rate setting process is once we kind of start getting our methodology down on how we want to look at the system and do long-term planning for repair and replacement, you then have to be realistic on what is a reasonable rate increase and what is not. And so that also will start to guide how your capital improvement program looks. So we wanted to just do this initial presentation, obtain input from the board, understand what your questions are so we can bring more information back, and then we'll continue to refine this data in this presentation over time and bring it back to the board again for additional information. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Roderick, and he can kick it off.
Any questions? Okay. Yeah, give it a shot. All right, so as Jennifer said, this is a draft 5-year plan that we put together, and what you don't see in the background is the spreadsheets that have all the projects, right? This isn't to talk about specific projects and get down into those weeds. This is just more of the big picture item. So a few of the things that we'll be going through, we'll be talking about the Fund 15 as well as the Fund 55. We'll talk about what we're kind of our average look for typical projects and what we anticipate that kind of burn rate to be. And then we're also going to talk about some of those bigger capital projects that are looming out there in the 5-year plan, and then how that looks when you combine them together. And then the other part, we're going to talk a little bit about the R&R, which is the repair and replacement of our existing facilities. And if we try to do that within some reasonable time frame, what does that look like in terms of cost impacts to the capital budget? So the Fund 35, which is REC, and the Fund 70, those would come at a later date. They're going to be much smaller. Fund 70 would be things probably like the ADA transition plan that's related here to the building, and things like that, but it's going to be on a much smaller scale. Okay, so Fund 15, this is the water fund, as we like to call it. We kind of broke it down into several categories. You have the capital equipment, which is pretty typical, your pickups, the heavy equipment, et cetera. You have your administrative, for the most part, that's the charging stations that we're currently working on here to start to ramp ourselves up to meet the requirements, and Steve's crew is doing a good job doing that. We got treated water, which is all of our treated water infrastructure, and then we got the raw water. So it's relatively straightforward. Did want to point out that the scoring criteria is still being utilized. We're still using that format that we've shown in the past. And when we bring the actual budget for next year, you'll have those detailed sheets like we've done before, so you will see that. Did want to point out that we did prioritize the treated and raw water separately. So there's a 1 through 50 on treated and a 1 through 50 on raw, partly because we don't want one to potentially get all the funds and not have, I guess, fun too, and then for the other to not get there. Plus, it also helps with the rates. When we start to go through the rate strategies, you can start to see burn rates for the raw water users and burn rates for the treated water users, right? That gives us a better feel when we do that. And then to try to keep that burn rate at that number that we tried to hit, we fill in little projects, you know, year 26, we're a little light, then I bring one up, maybe a PRB station or something like that. That's a relatively small project to try to keep those burn rates relatively flat. And we can talk about that as we go through. And the only other thing is, of course, sometimes regulatory requirements prioritize our projects for us. And that's just the way, like Scott's Flat would be one, right? I mean, clearly we need to work on it and we need to do things, but would we be as aggressive as trying to get it done in the next 3 years versus maybe 5 to 7 years? Yeah, things like that. And then, of course, like Jennifer said, if something pops up like Squirrel Creek we did last year, right, that came out of nowhere, those things happen. Okay, so here's what we got for Fund 15. I won't go through every price item here. This is, I think, straightforward. What I'll highlight is we're averaging about 11 projects a year, and this is what we're proposing for kind of our normal burn rate for projects, for CIP projects moving forward in the next 5 years. We average about, I think there's a total of 58 projects or something. We're averaging about 11 a year, which is within the wheelhouse that we have the manpower and capability of dealing with. And so you see treated water and raw, it kind of does, it bounces around a little bit in terms of the cost. We spend a little bit more on the raw water side than the treated water side overall, which makes sense because we've got a lot more raw water infrastructure than treated water infrastructure. But again, we are trying to get to that around $7.5 to $8 million burn rate, and that's what you see there on kind of the average per total for the 5 years.
How do you classify the upper division?
So it gets a little wonky in terms of like the flume, for example, which is why that's kind of a separate item, where both use it. And Jennifer may be able to better explain that, but we need to figure out when we do the rate stuff is how much the treated and raw water customers use and how much is hydro paying for because it's related to their.
So if you were, let's say there was a $1 million project, you would put some sort of percentage based on usage for raw water and treated water out of that 1 million and split it across into the budget? Into the budget
in here. So this would be more of the question is Fund 55 paying for it or is Fund 15 paying for it? Right. Is really where that comes from, right?
I'm talking more holistically.
Yeah.
I mean, all the water's coming from the upper division, but how do we have some sort of confidence in 1.5 million versus 4.2 million that, I mean, it's 2 million of that 4.2 million upper division that possibly could be contributed?
This does not include upper division.
No, this does not.
So upper division, outside of a very large capital project, for example, Scott's Flat Spillway, those capital projects for the upper division are paid for out of hydropower. So the question becomes, these raw water projects that are shown on this particular slide, these are all lower division raw water projects.
And this is because of the ongoing notion that hydro pays for the upper division.
Correct. So this is probably going to be the biggest conversation we need to have as how to moving into rates. How do we continue divvying up that hydropower money? Currently, hydropower money pays for the upper division outside of very large projects, and then lower division treated water pays for all the treated water. And then raw water pays for their fair share kind of portion of raw water. The question is, I think, is how do you split that hydropower money? Do we continue to utilize it how we have been, takes care of upper division, or is it somehow otherwise prorated?
I get what you're saying, I'm thinking.
It gets extremely complex. So remember with Prop 2.
I have an opinion, but I'll.
Yeah. With Proposition 218, when you establish rates, the rate has to be directly proportional to the benefit that is received by any particular customer class of ratepayer. And so when you go through rates, you can't have one customer class subsidizing another customer class. And that's why, so for example, raw water customers couldn't pay for any penny of what's needed for a treatment plant. And vice versa. And so what makes it complicated for us is bringing in this kind of hydropower revenue.
Right.
When do you anticipate having that conversation with the board about the division of the upper division cost?
Yeah, I think Dustin and I need to have a couple more conversations about it. There's a lot of legal analysis that needs to go into the questions surrounding whether hydropower, and Dustin can speak to this better than I can, is kind of held in public trust and is an asset of the collective ratepayers.
And this is relative to how, this discussion is how it applies to setting rates. We do with how we handle or how we show hydropower.
This is a workshop. Yes.
Yeah. So Dustin, do you want to speak? And I don't want to get too wrapped around it. This is a very complex legal analysis, but I'm going to have Dustin speak to it very
and we're
quickly.
not done with that legal analysis.
Yeah.
So more to come. But to me, I would frame the question, Director Beerwagen, as can you disproportionately apply a subsidy for some customers, but not all?
That's been the discussion since I've been here.
Mhm.
So we let Jen and I have that discussion internally, and then we'll present it to the board.
How soon?
I don't know, let us go back in. We've been a little bit busy on other things, so let us regroup and we'll.
Is this too early?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Too early in the conversation.
So not,
I think it's a little premature in this particular conversation, but it's so good to keep having, right?
Right.
not to make an insinuation that you would do this, but just to be clear, I would like to hear the legal arguments for and against, not the general manager's decision on how to apply that. Because this is going to become a huge issue.
This is for and against the application of the hydro.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to be clear, yeah.
I'd like to understand the law, because if
Yeah.
the law precludes me
Yeah.
from supporting what the raw water ratepayers were sold as a bill of goods in the sixties and seventies, then we should update everyone's knowledge and move forward. If not, then there's gonna be a real conversation.
And I just want to be clear, I don't have a preference. My one and only preference is that we are not about putting ourselves at legal risk. And that's why it's a complex conversation. I need to really.
That's paramount, for sure.
Yeah.
I do have a preference, and I believe that hydro is subsidizing, treated water by paying for the upper division. And I don't think that that's how it was sold to the public. This is gonna become a major issue for me.
Yeah,
As it has been, I don't think this is a surprise, right?
No, it's no surprise. Just remember that 90% of our water that moves through the system is raw water.
Right.
Okay.
And just all these numbers on how they get disseminated to the different customer base on terms of the rates, these are the numbers that we'll be using, right? So,
Well, you only have the numbers for the lower division because.
no, that, when we get to hydro, I have.
We haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay, but that's not how it's been used in the past.
Hey, so you guys started on the hydro thing, and you've all heard me say this before, and a reminder, the only reason that this district is in the hydro business is to subsidize raw water rates. That's what was promised to the ratepayers. That was why we as ratepayers bonded this before I was born. And so I want to reiterate that. I cannot come into this board meeting without emphasizing that agriculture needs affordable, reliable water. So as long as we recall that why we're in the hydro business is to subsidize raw water rates, I will continue to beat on that. Thank you.
So just remember, a portion of treated water is raw water, right? So when you look at treated water costs, they pay for all the treated water costs and then their fair share apportionment of raw water costs. Yeah.
And Prop 218 is more recent.
Yeah, Prop 218 was originally passed in 1996, and it has been refined over the years over numerous lawsuits.
Court decisions.
Court decisions.
Since you were born.
Many things happen.
I think I'm gonna mirror something similar to what this gentleman just said. Over the years, growing up for my whole life, it seems like NID costs or rates continue to go up. And then as NID has become more efficient with distribution of water, those efficiencies have been paid for by the people paying the rates, as well as the general funds paying for these hydro plants to offset costs or to bring, I guess where I'm going with this is, it seems to me that the hydro has been, the customers of NID have kind of paid for this infrastructure, and I would personally like to see that these hydro plants are compensating the general public in some way that they can actually see or feel, like lower rates for raw water, or maybe lower power rates. I mean, that's a whole different story, whether it gets sold to PG&E, getting sold back to us cheaper, but somehow that this infrastructure that we're seeing getting more efficient every year, with your knowledge and support, that it starts to feel that the public can feel like it's compensated them in some way or another. That's
For the record, hydro is probably revenue somewhere around 24 million a year, and they were able to pay for the upper division and also get over 10 million to help with subsidized rates. Now,
Yeah.
having said that-
Every year.
Each year.
No, that's then maybe.
Having said that, a lot of capital improvement projects coming forward. So that may be over.
Well, my viewpoint's a little different. So we're now offsetting rates by about 6 million a year. It used to be 10 to 12 million a year. So that offset is shrinking while the rates are going up. With that said, I will say, if you compare our raw water rates to other counties, the rates here are very cheap compared to other counties. And I'm not advocating for an increase, but we've kept them that way, and they haven't gone up for a few years. So, there's a little bit of both here. One is that subsidy is shrinking while the prices go up, but we have done, I think the district prior to me has done a good job of keeping the rates fairly low.
Yeah,
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm not complaining, I'm just expressing maybe what general public feel, and that's that maybe somehow educating the public that their rates could have gone up quite a bit more if we didn't have this infrastructure and this efficiency. And
for the record, we haven't raised rates in 3 years. And, but I agree with you on the education. We need to put it out there. Hey, we're holding expenses as much as we can, keeping the rates down. Can't do that forever. So continue a lot of regulatory projects we have to do that are demanded of us.
Telling the story is a real challenge, but that really speaks to the heart of your comment, is that how it's perceived as a ratepayer feels totally different than how we understand it inside the organization, that hydro has been a huge benefit to our customer base, but that's not transparent to them. And then as Rich talks about, the cost escalation that the district has faced and has managed, and the regulatory environment completely changes the scene for us as a irrigation district.
And I think one thing also to remember when we were looking at past years and the amount of actual subsidy of money being transferred over to water, it's also a reflection of the fact that all of the overhead expenditures were all being paid for out of Fund 10. So now that that's been pulled apart in a more traditional accounting method, you're seeing less of that money being pushed over.
Let's pull apart the upper division, and I'll be on board.
All right.
What helped me a lot was we finally saw the number, because I experienced one of the transfers in only for the first 4 years here, and then learned 12 million worth of value is contributed by hydro to the water system in general.
Sure.
So that was huge for us, right?
Yes.
there's that unknown part, unseen part, we didn't even see, how's the public gonna see, right?
Right.
Right. So a lot of this will a lot of these conversations will be more well-defined once we kind of start getting into rate design, and then Dustin's able to finish the legal analysis. So we'll bring that back.
I think just generally speaking, I think that somehow if the farmers could have some confidence that their rates aren't gonna go up through the efficiency of the improvements, I think economically our community needs to be able to count on agricultural and farmers need to count on it. As long as these efficiencies keep going into place, their costs aren't gonna go up for water. That's.
And then we'll look at California.
Yes.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Like Trevor said, we're putting water out there very affordable right now. So let's get back to and the administrative fees. I had a question.
Yeah.
Those are the recharging?
Yeah, most of that is the recharging related to Fund 15, which will be for the vehicles.
For recharging electric vehicles.
Yeah, that's basically to get the stations in, we have to make improvements to the power systems here at the PG&E system, needs to be upgraded to be able to accommodate those, and then installing some stations over the next couple years. That's kind of the thought.
And to be clear, that is a regulatory requirement.
Yeah.
Right? It's not something we just went, oh, this is a great.
Right.
Yeah. Remember, we had the presentation record.
Oh, I do remember, but I'm saying it
Yeah.
more for the public and folks who are online.
Right.
It's not like we're just suddenly choosing to spend $2 million.
This is a huge example, well, huge is my little world, right? How many dollars is it? $2 million. That's, not the mandates, okay? And where does that money come from?
Ratepayers.
And we want to sit here and say we keep water rates low, and we have, how many of these every year, unfunded mandates that we have to, things we have to do? Tons.
That'd be an interesting chart.
That would.
What's the equipment, the actual equipment that uses the charging stations? Yeah, right?
They just added trains.
Yeah.
But could you comment on the average expenditures for our CIP for the last 5 or 10 years? I mean, whatever number is appropriate. I know we've had COVID and that required a dip, so take those kind of out of the picture. What would we expect to be spending?
So we've bounced around a little bit. Before COVID, I think our numbers were closer to about $10 to $11 million a year is what we were trying to accomplish. And then that has been shrinking these last couple of years, partly because we have an increased rate, so we're trying to keep our capital expenses down. And so I think last year was 5-something, I think is what was in was Fund 15.
Let's talk about the gauging stations.
Yeah, so I just want to include there that, that's a big part of what we're doing, and so included in this is it's in the raw water component of it. There are gauging stations. I think there's 7 in terms of this 5-year plan, and these are just stations that are big enough that require engineering support and additional effort in order to install them. Operations is continuing to install gauging stations now that our maintenance crews can just go out and they're relatively straightforward and they don't need a lot of additional effort. So these are the higher, the more elaborate type of sections that we have to work on to make them operational.
That's something that we've directed.
Correct.
Recommended to do. I understand now after a conversation over the weekend that the state is finalizing a lot of the reporting online system. And part of it is they're also going to do a pilot program on the Russian River where they're going to put gauging stations on it and pay for it because they have figured out that maybe they're only getting 20% compliance on the Russian River. And they want to tie that down. But I also understood that they might want to also have another pilot program somewhere and set it up. If they're not going to pay for gauging stations, I think we'd be a candidate.
Yeah, we've submitted several grant applications and we'll continue to look for that. What this assists us with doing is more efficiently running the canal so that we're not letting as much tailwater go.
Right. As versus reporting.
Increase efficiency.
Yep.
We're done, getting control over the canals as much as possible is going to be the best for a water supply perspective.
Save a lot of water.
Mhm.
We'll pay for it.
Yeah.
But also, could be used for reporting?
Yeah, to some extent, we, report on much larger nodes than where we're gauging. But I think that all of we do have a couple of big outlets that still require gauges. But those are very expensive, like Canyon Creek, yeah.
Larger ends, that
What we have to report on is a lot of times kind of your point of delivery. We do have some challenges going down the Yuba side with not having real good gauging coming out of the district because of the topography related to Canyon Creek. On the Yuba side?
The particular ditch?
Canyon Creek.
Canyon Creek.
Yeah. Did you say that the spillway is not?
It is.
It's part
It's part of 55 for now. I'll show it in 55.
Yeah, we're not showing it in Fund 15.
15, right. Yeah, it's coming up. Okay. Any questions on that component? Okay, so the next one is, in the Fund 15, what large projects do we have on the horizon in the next 5 years, right? And so, right now, we currently have the Lake Wildwood Treatment Plant upgrades sitting in the 5-year plan. And so what you see here on this screen in that first one is kind of what the impacts to our capital budgets will be in 25, mostly 26 and 27, as we move forward with that project. These numbers are a little higher than what you remember probably the last time when we had the PEP. Part of that was for some contingencies just related to the fact that things went crazy in these last 2 years worth of costs, and then also in addition to that, just upgrading them or upping them based on a 2.7%, which is, I talk about that, I think, on the 2 more slides, and we can get into that a little more when I get to that one, in terms of a per year number to escalate those costs.
Refresh my memory on Lake Wildwood treatment plant. This is, foggy about whether this is actual replacement of the plant or the Band-Aid.
Correct. This would replace the plant. This would upgrade the plant, most likely with the modular unit, yep. Mm-hmm.
And this is a must-do.
Yeah. We need to do something, yeah. And we don't necessarily.
Backbone extension.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was the discussion we had before, right?
We had a big discussion on that.
And
To rebuild the plant rather than.
Yeah.
At that time.
remember, it was more to do with the upfront capital costs were considerably higher for the pipe.
Right.
Maintenance costs were much lower, if you look at it that long term, right? And what we don't have here, I think in the BET pipeline, we were using about $25 a diameter inch, give or take. And what you'll see in another slide is we're now at 35, which is what our current bids are coming in at, so it's $35 a diameter inch. So just in that generalization, you're adding $10 to $12 million to the cost of the initial BET, just based on the pipe diameter stuff. So it's gone up quite a bit as well.
This has gone up 30%. What's that just due to inflation, or is that due to more regulatory requirements?
It's inflation, it's putting in there some additional contingency as we move forward with the design component of it and what that ultimately is going to look like. But yeah, in these last couple of years, we've had this really crazy swing, right, of the cost really escalating in between. Now we're trying to get it back down to some reasonable number, the feds are. And so when I'm looking at a 50-year plan, I'm not looking at this last 3 or 4 years, because then these numbers would just be obscene in terms of the increase when you're trying to build out a 5-year plan. And in this case, for the BEP and the treatment plan, it was looking at a 50-year window. What does that look like in terms of pushing costs out for O&M and that kind of thing? So I don't remember exactly where I was going with that.
The cost.
So the cost, yeah. So I've escalated those costs that the consultant had done a couple years ago from that initial study. And then I've also added some additional contingency in there as we move forward with design. So it's a combination of those two things why that number is a little higher.
$23.5 million.
Correct.
$25.
Approximate, yep.
You're using 18-inch.
It varied between the different scenarios. It was 16 and 18 were the most common ones. depending on those, yeah.
And yet, okay, and the overall maintenance was $2 million over 50 years versus $32 million for operations and maintenance of the water treatment plant. So how much, do we have an idea how much that $2 million for the backbone would be, or how much would the $32 million for the water treatment plant?
In terms of the cost escalating, going up. So yeah, so if you do that 2.7 over the 50 years, the 32 roughly becomes about 38, and the pipe costs go from 2 to about 3 million. So again, the O&M costs, and when you look at the long projected laid out costs, that project had some merit. But the impact to the capital of actually installing it is considerable, and considerably more than what this treatment plant would be.
It's one of those situations where, in the absolute law, if you took the long view, building the BEP is better. If you take then you're gonna be impacting today's.
I always look at it this way, so, you know, some people shop at Costco, buy a bunch of toilet paper all at once, and some people can't afford to do that.
We're in the can't afford to build that. You could, but it'd be to the demise of other projects.
Yes.
So the treatment plant was 50 years, and we looked at it with the pipeline's probably closer to 100, but we looked at a 50-year window to see what that would look like when we compared the two. Yeah.
Yeah, but
50 years, plant for water.
If I take the value of the dollar back in the 1970s versus now, 50 years, we're not worth much compared to what we buy back then. I guess I don't trust the 2.7% inflationary factor every year, or cost factor, because, and I agree with you that the COVID thing is going on, but I'm not so sure we're not going to see a lot of one-offs. We're just estimating in prices, and I'm just trying to, how much longer could we wait on the water treatment plant? Is this gotten to a point where it's urgent, we have to start next year, or could we wait?
Will it fail or fall apart within the next year? No.
Yeah.
It won't. We need to do some additional work to it.
Yeah.
If we're gonna try to keep it for 5 years or so, we're gonna have to spend some money on it to make sure it can meet minimum requirements between now and that. Yeah.
So I guess my point is that if you took the backbone, stretched it out for 5 years, and kept the water treatment plant going, we'd be ahead, because only we spend $5 million a year, maybe a little more on the backbone. And then we'd be down to minimal each year for maintenance. And we've got, you know, some customers gonna book in.
Well, that's ultimately a decision that gets made by others, in terms of the impact to the cost, right? I can just tell you that you're gonna be spending $6 to $7 million a year for those 5 years to get the BEP put in. So your capital cost in that time frame, the money's gotta come from somewhere. And either at the chagrin of all the other improvements that we need to make, or you're bonding for it and the ratepayers are paying for the bonding of that, et cetera, right? So, yeah. I think we're in the same boat. Ultimately, the idea is the same. The capital costs up front are considerably higher for the BEP than it is for the treatment plant, even now. The O&M long-term costs are absolutely the opposite. And so, based on what we had the discussion for, we're doing the Lake Wildwood.
I think the general discussion, what Jennifer said about at the cost of other projects,
That's the problem.
we have to throw that all in big pot, that's what the board has to do.
Well, and when we get into rate design, we can show rates with both, you know, different rate scenarios with the BEP or with the treatment plant.
Well, I was gonna, so when you go to the 218, this is distributed across the whole ratepayers, or just ratepayers in that area?
Well, so traditionally, the district has done what's referred to as the postage stamp rate. And that means no matter where you live, you pay, you know, the same by customer class.
But does that hold true after all the litigation on 218?
You can still, because I mean, our system is so large and has so many nuanced complexities on how to get water to where. If we went to a zone-based system, we could, there would be some folks very unhappy with that.
I asked because, at a risk of dating myself, I was living in Lake of the Pines when they put that water plant in, and we voted as homeowners on paying for that. So did NID pick up the whole tab for that, or did the Lake of the Pines homeowners picked up the tab?
I believe that was installed as part of the subdivision, and then we.
Usually when there's a development.
You guys took it over after the fact.
I believe it's like
That's
a
usually how-
water line, they installed all the water lines, they did it.
Because
And then.
Dark Horse tried to tie into it, and we said no. The golf course behind it. They wanted to tie into that, and we as homeowners owned that, and we told them no. So it's very confusing to me of why NID's on the hook for Wildwood when the homeowners were on the hook for Lake of the Pines.
Usually when it just depends on the time, when development came forward, what the agreements were, what was there. I don't know the history, but typically when a new development is building, the developer either pays development impact
This was all
fees.
built out. Lake of the Pines did this in the 80s.
Yeah, I don't know, I'd have to.
I don't understand that, because Dark Horse is tied to the LOP system.
They did eventually.
Yeah, oh, you mean that we're still under some
Yeah,
agreement?
Litigation.
Yeah, I
It
don't-
was one of the first property
Okay.
investments there. And I got out of it. And as you, I don't know if you know, but they were on generators and stuff
Oh, yeah.
for 2 years.
I was there for that whole fiasco, it was awesome.
So we have redundancy.
Yes.
Well, Lake of the Pines, now we have that feeder line that runs down to help supplement it during peak flows, or if we need to. Correct.
And that is one thing the board can contemplate when we get into rate design. You know, if you wanted to go to some type of zonal rates, that can be looked at. Our system would be
Difficult.
difficult.
We said no last time around, this is good.
Yeah, you get people, a lot of folks at the very end of the system end up paying an enormous amount.
Companies fail when they say this isn't how we always did it, right? So let's at least contemplate.
We can look at it for sure.
Okay. Okay, so, with the treatment plan added, then you see what the number is. It averages, overall in that 5-year plan goes up to about almost, 10. So now let's talk a little bit about the R&R costs. And so I'll start with the treated water lines, and basically, it's a relatively simplistic concept, right? I looked at how many miles of water lines we have, which is about 430 miles. And if I wanted to replace all those within 100 years, I'd have to replace 4.3 miles every year for the next 100 years. Not to take into account that some of our system is already 60 and 70 years old, but if we were gonna, it's like painting the bridge, right? The Golden Gate Bridge, you paint to the one end and then you start back over again, because by the time you got there, you did it. So again, I looked at it based on what our current bid numbers are coming in at, which is that $35 a diameter inch. I assumed everything was 8 inch just for this purpose. At least about 170 miles of it, almost half is 8 inch, and then it kind of bounces around between 6 and 10 a lot, and then up and down. So I used that. So the initial cost, if you just split that 100 years, and that $35 diameter inch, is a little over $6 million. $6.3 million a year is what we need to spend for the next 100 years to replace it. And then on top of that, what I did is, of course, escalated it at that 2.7%. And what I used for that is I looked at ENR's construction cost index prior to COVID. And so I think that was like the 4 or 5 years prior to that. It averaged about 2.7%. So that's what I based it off of. So at least you now have an idea what
your assumption
came from. Yeah, yeah.
We did factor in.
Be a much bigger spreadsheet, I'm afraid. And then similar for the raw water. And now this is just for our pipes. This is just raw water pipes, siphons, et cetera. This isn't all our canals, right? This is just the pipe type infrastructure that we're talking about. There's about 94 miles of it. So same idea. If I basically doing a mile a year, I assumed an average of 30 inch, about 43 to 44 miles. So it's about half of our infrastructure of that is that 24 to 30 inch range of pipe size. So it made sense to use 30 inch as just kind of an overall. Some projects will be a 54 inch, some projects will be an 18, right? But just kind of averaging based on kind of what our biggest numbers are is in that 30 inch range. You can see there, we need to spend about $4 million a year, starting in 2025 for the next 100 years, just for replacement of those 94 miles
And
of
is your
pipe.
thought process here that on average, 1 mile goes bad a year?
No, it was just, we have to replace infrastructure.
Yeah.
So we have to do it at a certain time frame. And what is that?
It was giving it a 100-year life cycle.
A 100-year life cycle. So I install a pipe, it's gonna be good for 100 years, and then I'm gonna need to replace it.
But in the implementation, you would prioritize the oldest.
Correct. Correct.
It's not like you're just gonna start on the street and go that way.
No, you would not do that, correct.
Yeah, and this doesn't take into account, because it would be cost prohibitive, that most of this pipe is already 60 years old. So we're starting with a young.
Yeah, otherwise I'd be trying to do it a lot faster to get
Right.
it replaced, right? This is,
Just an idea of if we want to start, if the board desires to start collecting revenue for this kind of long-term routine capital replacement, this is how you start funding it. But you do exactly what you said. You actually plan real projects.
Correct.
No problem.
I'm involved in an organization that does this now, and it's working really great. There's just a bunch of money that goes in there, and all of a sudden the roof went down, right? And there was a lot of money, spend it all, spend most of it on the roof. I think
This is how you handle pavement replacement, pipeline replacement. It's a tool that's utilized for a lot of infrastructure. But do keep in mind, this is a imperfect calculation we put forward because we're not taking into account that a lot of the treated water pipe is already 60 years old.
or raw water even older.
Or raw water even older.
Right. I wondered about 2 sidings in my district. Those things gotta be installed when the ditch went in, right? They're still there. Can we compare and contrast that to what we've been doing in this department, in any shape or form? I know that's been fix as we go, right?
Yeah, that's my question.
How much have we been spending on fix as we go?
Yeah, so you can see, if you just, and in the next, maybe I'll go to the next slide too, because that'll help a little bit. So when I added those in, when you look at these numbers for total, like for treated or raw, I didn't just add 6.3 million to the line, right? So I looked at it and I said, well, 3 of my projects that year are pipeline replacements, which would be part of what this $6.3 million would be, right? So that's why it doesn't just add on top of the 6.3 and the 3.9. So I looked into that, but basically that's what we're doing. For a lot of what we're doing is replacing pipes that leak, we're replacing that type of thing. And so it's saying we need about 4 million or 10 million a year, almost 11 million a year, starting to ratchet it up over the next 100 years. We're kind of doing that now, other than we're just burning it at a little slower rate, which is, right now, we're talking about 7.8 million is what we're hoping to spend on average over the next 5 years. But that takes into account things too, like things that we don't have, which is vehicles, which is charging stations, which is ramp repairs, which is gauging stations, all those other components, canal lining, I mean, all those different types of things, treatment plant upgrades, all those extra things are also biting at the apple in terms of the capital budget. So I don't know if I have a real specific answer, other than we're continuing to do it, but we're clearly not doing it at the rate that, based on these simple calcs, we would need to be doing that.
And what about like those emergency repairs? You know, think about Ridge Road, right? When that massive failure there. And, you know, is that within your capital?
So if the replacement of the pipeline is, it would be in there. If you're talking about just the fixing of pulling out a section or welding a section in there and patching it and putting on, that comes out of the maintenance budget, right? That's just part of our O&M costs that we deal with.
Okay, great.
We're doing on a regular basis, and that's part of how we prioritize things, right? It's like maintenance says, hey, we've been on this street 16 times in the last year. We need to get it replaced because it's starting to become a problem, right? Whereas it only happened once. So that one probably a little lower in terms of it seems to be operating, but it may fail tomorrow, but at least, yeah. We've got lots of wood plugs and steel pipes all over the place. And bands, absolutely, yeah.
Well, it's, you know, the numbers are astronomical. And so I'm wondering, I mean, I know we're not talking about specific projects right now, what's in, what's out, but, it's hard to fathom that we would be able to invest this amount of money. I don't know if we're talking about being able to finance some of it to help soften the cost or what it is, but just staggering to customers.
Yeah, so this is how, so you're absolutely correct. So what ends up happening is we go, okay, we take all of our reserves, and then we take all the revenue we think is coming in, and then we take the ideal capital program and we put it into the rate model. And then you get these astronomical rate increases and we say, okay, that's no way. That is not gonna be palatable to our customers. Then we'll come back to the board and we'll say, okay, ideally, we would be collecting $4 million a year for raw water pipelines. We're gonna recommend for this rate period only $1 million. So we'll start turning the knob to make it more, acceptable to the ratepayers as well as to the board. Yeah.
With the understanding that, which has to be done, right? I'm a ratepayer, I get it. But the smaller we make that number, the more we're kicking down the
Kicking the can.
of what needs to be done. And that's the hard balance that you folks get to make, right?
Raw water users understand this. I don't think that we should, not give them that level of understanding of the system. I've had multiple come to me and say, we're not doing enough on the improvement side, on the maintenance side, and we should be investing more there. So I think given a clear understanding of the status of the system and the risk involved, reliable water is part of the focus, the goal. And, we should have that discussion. This is what it takes to be reliable, and this is what the cost impact is.
Yeah, we don't want to be like PG&E.
Yeah, I mean, they're only.
It's true. We have an obligation.
The infrastructure, and I think that.
It's one of the most important things we spend money on.
Kicking the can down the road without exposing what the risk is.
Right.
Yeah, right. The reliability becomes something that everybody has to understand, that you may have more outages because things fail.
And then we'll start having hard conversations. Okay, so you want to take 5% off this projected rate increase. Here's the 3 cans you can kick down the road.
That's the conversation.
Yes, and, from a risk perspective, I would pay for this can. And if you're gonna kick something, do this can, right?
Right.
Because there are things we can continue to Band-Aid, treated water line or one raw water pipe, we can tackle that. Some of the higher division items, they do need to be addressed. So.
Yeah. So again, we'll finish with this page. Let's see, you can see, we try to implement all of that. Then you're spending almost $17.5 a year, 5 years.
Currently,
It's about 10 million more than we would spend on average.
do you have like a thumb in the air kind of number, like what's $1 million extra dollars spent? Rich can do that for you. I know somebody had that.
Yeah, I think it's about 2%.
4 cents per gallon of water,
Oh.
or whatever. If we
For every
I think it's every
million
2, it's
extra we
2%.
spend a year, how much more percent? Yeah.
It's the raw that are treated.
1% for 350.
I think it's about 2% per million, a little over 2.2.
So 2% rate increase per million spent.
But those, remember, we have good reserves,
Understood, I'm just.
Yes, but, so you're looking at, that would be a mega rate increase.
Well, it's not as bad as the City of Lincoln did.
Believe me, I'd pay that.
I don't even live in that house.
were you there for the change?
No.
Or last,
This one would not have been supportive of that change.
Oh, okay.
Our last increases for over 3 years were 5.72% per year. Put it in context. That would have generated about $2.5 million. 2.5.
Okay, so now we'll switch to Fund 55. So this is where, and we've got it broken down into these components. This is where the upper division stuff, the reservoirs, the dams, spillways, that kind of stuff, those are all sitting in here. And then, of course, you have your powerhouse equipment, et cetera, in that as well. So this is what we anticipate being we'd like to see as an average burn rate for Fund 55. See, the first 2 years are the highest, and that has to do with, we've got quite a bit of money sitting in there for the building at Colfax to get that completed and get it online. And then we have a relatively constant rate thereafter. We're spending, you know, roughly $3 million, $3.5 million a year over the next 5 years.
When you say the building in Colfax, you're talking about the new hydro?
Yeah. We need to put.
Well, we sell the other building. Depends on what the other building sells for.
We don't know yet.
But you have more efficiencies in this building.
You do, and it was considerably less than in the other one, which was like, I think, 20 million.
That was a real cost savings. The building is so large, I don't know if that energy offset's gonna be all that much.
Maybe able to lease some of that out or something.
Site for communications still.
Say that again? I didn't hear that one.
Tower up for communications? No.
And we don't think that was needed.
No, we think we can, participate with Fletcher County and use their tower. Hey Doug, what about the Chicago Park Rewind, which I probably.
Coming, we're coming.
Oh, you're coming, oh, okay.
I'm almost there.
I heard about you know,
Yeah, so this is the non-big capital item,
Oh, okay.
which is
I'm with you.
that item as well as the Scotts Flat. That'll come in the next sheet.
Charging stations on administrative?
That's in there, yeah, it's a smaller component for them, but yes, we have that in there. There's some other stuff in there. I'm trying to remember what was in the administrative. I think that had to do with some of the generalized equipment, it had to do with communications and some of those different things that we had lumped into.
Their administration is a
Administrative, it's a little different than here.
different.
Yeah. For 55, lash, well, you know what that would be, the lash, about 4?
Yeah, it's close to what you're seeing here. Or this is kind of base, this side's showing you base level capital expenditures, which
Yeah.
is comparable to what we have been spending, kind of fluctuates.
Well, really after that, those first 2 years, then we're down that 3 to 2.5 million range.
We don't have a line item for
$1.
It's only gonna be $1.
$1.
Do it.
Well, you bring $1, we can give them 5.
I said be careful, I had a gas.
Okay, so here's Fund 55. Now, here's the large projects that we're talking about in the next 5 years. So you got Scotts Flat Spillway, which right now is getting pushed to about $26 million. That keeps creeping up. We're at 60% design, just got submitted to DSOD and FERC. We're gonna have a discussion this afternoon about some construction options in terms of how we build it and the timing in which to do it. But yeah, we had to do some additional work in the upper plunge pool that we were hoping not to do. So that cost is reflected in that, which is another reason why it's gone up some. And then you got Chicago Park Powerhouse, and you see there how it's laid out. There's some design, there's some procurement of equipment ahead of time and some deposits, that kind of thing. And then that 2 to 3 month outage we have in the 1 year is where we're gonna spend the bulk of the money and then do all the actual
What are our revenues?
physical work.
40 days?
About 10 million.
Yeah.
So it pays for itself in a hurry.
The rewind?
Yeah. So for just those, you see kind of what we got there. We're gonna be over basically the next 4 years, we'd be spending almost $47 million for those two projects.
So all of that, that's a hard question to answer off the cuff, because what happens is we'll work with our financial advisors, we're gonna be applying for some federal funding. And so at the end of the day, it's gonna be what federal or state funding can we get? And then what makes more sense depending on how the market is doing? Do we bond or do we use cash? No, that's a full financial package that will come before the board.
We can rebond when interest rates go down.
You can, for sure.
We
Yeah,
We did that.
do a bond reissuance.
We did that, remember, 4
What do
years
you
ago?
anticipate?
Well, we've been kind of going back and forth with DSOD. I'm not quite sure. We're kind of getting to a better spot. The full financial package, as far as any grants or federal funding, we had to make sure we were finally getting close to knowing what year we're going to construction. So probably in the next 6 months or so.
So I've made a previous request to have it could be a WAG calendar that have the dates for all the inputs that we need to do the rate decision. Can we get something?
Absolutely.
Like this would be one of them.
For sure.
Is the funding options for these two projects.
Oh, putting that on there? Yes,
The
we can
date,
do that.
when you would bring it to us.
We can do that.
What I don't want to do is what we ended up with last year is now we're making a budget decision and the conversation happens in the next month. I want to avoid that again.
Yeah, we can bring you a calendar.
And then, so what you see there below, is just if you throw those two big capital items into the overall number, you'll see that in the 5-year window, we're spending about $65 million, or a burn rate of about, bounces around depending on the year type. Kind of heavy right in the middle there, as you can see, we're spending roughly $20 million for almost 3 years in a row.
How much is in
The current reserve sits, well, it's higher, no?
I don't know off the top of my head. I just looked at it, I don't know. It's about 55 million, I think.
Is there a trigger date on the spillway where this, like, construction has to start or stop? Like,
So.
You're just fitting it into?
Yeah, I mean, so the idea is that we're being driven obviously by the regulatory agencies to get this project completed. And so what we're doing is, we were originally hoping to be able to go to construction starting next year. That's not gonna happen because of timing delays of getting approvals through the regulatory process. And so the reality is we're gonna go through this next year, have that finally approved, get all the permits, et cetera. It'll be too late to bid that out and award to a contractor to start work because they're only gonna be working basically from when Scott's comes off spill until October or maybe early November. That's gonna be their window to work. They're not gonna be able to work year round. So we're looking at at least a 2-year construction window, maybe 3 after we have a discussion. So those are the things we're looking at in terms of that.
But is there like a hard date that the government put on us?
No, other than you must get this done, and so we're going through that process. Now, if we were to say we needed to wait 1 more year after we got approvals and all that, I mean, if we didn't have the money, I guess we didn't have the money. I don't know how that would go. They're typically not very receptive to you saying they don't have the money. So, but the things to think about, are like Chicago Park and Scotts Flat. If Scotts Flat is driver and we want to consider pushing the rewind out an extra year or 2, that's just a risk-based decision, right? I can't tell you that you can't push out Chicago Park 5 more years and it'll continue to spin just wonderfully and we'll be fine. It could fail, or it could spin wonderfully and be fine. It could fail tomorrow. It could be a partial failure where it's just a portion of it. So maybe we have to reduce the amount that it can generate. So it'll impact our revenue, but we'll still be able to generate, but it'll cost money to get that fixed to be able to do that, right? I mean, there's all those different components. It's reached its life cycle. It's got some issues. I can't, it's just, the longer you wait, the more likely it is that it will fail. What that failure looks like and how long that will take to get there.
Are there any other projects in the hydro area besides these two large capital projects that we should be looking at?
Good question. Just outside of the 5-year window, I have 2 other projects sitting there. We got the Comey Dam, which we're gonna have to deal with. Effectively, I think what we said is that, and Kean, you correct me if I'm wrong, we get done with Scotts Flat and then we'll start that process of doing that one. Does that sound fair? So in the next 5 years after this window, we will be looking, I don't think that number is as big in terms of Comey, as Scotts Flat, but it's still gonna be substantial. I mean, we're still talking, whatever, $15 million or something like that, give or take.
Today's done.
Yeah, exactly. And then we also have the Dutch Flat 2 is in need of refurbishment and rewind. And that would be the other one that would be sitting in that potential next 5-year window. Again, that's gonna be smaller, it'll be a little cheaper, but it's still gonna be a substantial impact to the capital program.
And with the FERC realizing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
And then that's a whole different discussion. Hopefully, that just never gets approved and we're all still good.
Money were not the issue on Chicago Park. How fast could you get it done if you just went in and did it?
About like that.
That's it.
Yeah, because we have to go through the design process. Some of the stuff just takes a long time to get the components. I know like the transformer's still like 3 years out or something crazy like that. So, you know, we're doing things like, gonna look at purchasing that ahead of time, at least put a down payment on it so that we have it in 3 years. And so some of those components are what they are. They're just, I mean, we're still waiting for the work on North Auburn for just the small, motor control panels that we did for the improvements to the pumps. And we're not even getting the information back now on when that panel will be ready, right? So it's still crazy. Yeah, it also has issues, related to overturning and instability that we have to address. And so we've done some initial studies to identify that, and I think we've identified the alternative that we want to move forward with. And so now what we've said is, we'll do that, but we got to do this first at Scotts Flat, and then we'll concentrate. Next big project will be that one. So those are the two big ones in this fund sitting on the horizon. I don't necessarily see anything on the Fund 15 side in terms of big projects out there. At this point, it would be more of the general stuff, other than the Lake Wildwood treatment plant. That's really the only one that's relatively large. Yeah. Yep.
I kind of have a recollection, and maybe you can say that some years ago, prior to Jennifer, that didn't we buy some big, huge thing because it was cheaper to Chicago Park Rewind, and we had it delivered, and it was this massive piece of equipment that was the
TSV.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah. That was for Rollins, wasn't it?
Talking to Lola.
I'm assuming that was the valve for Rollins.
Okay.
It was in the backyard,
It was in the back.
yard in the back, you went and looked at
For some
it.
reason I thought it was something to do with
It's a German name, right? Klinger.
it came from Germany, right? Klinger.
I don't remember what the valve name was.
Yeah, I don't remember the manufacturer, but yeah,
Okay.
that's all it is.
Yeah, I was misremembering it.
Okay, so we got one more slide here, and I put it basically at the end. And this is, affectionately known as the Flume of Doom, which is the South Yuba Canal that we now own and operate, except for that first ever mile of pipe that PG&E owns and operates, that we're at the mercy of. So again, I looked at it in general, this in terms of just the flume replacement, so there's roughly 19 miles of the overall facility, 4.5 miles of that are flume. And so looking at trying to replace that in a 50-year window, it's about 460. I put a smaller window partly because of the nature of the structure and partly because, well, I couldn't do it any faster because the locations and how we're gonna have to deal with bypassing and doing that kind of stuff. There may be a project where maybe we can do a little more in 1 year, but then there'll be areas where we'd have to do less in another year just because of the topography and how we're gonna have to bypass or whether we can build next to it. So anyway, averaging about 466 feet a year of flume replacement over the next 50 years. And we'd start spending almost $3 million a year to start that process over a 50-year window.
Replacing the wood with steel.
Yeah, that would be looking to make some improvements potentially to the, whether it's steel, whether there's components, whether it's section you can put in a pipe maybe. No tunnels are included in this cost estimate, unfortunately.
Bummer. When you say flume, this is the only way it's the wood.
This is all the wood, basically, wood flume on it.
That was 14 miles or something.
Well, the total canal is 19.
Yeah, but the part that Jennifer's afraid of is only.
Well, according to the GED report that they developed, they had 4.4 miles of flume. I don't know if Ms. Keen has something different than that.
And if we wanted to accelerate.
Yeah, I don't agree either.
Worked out there.
Remember, the 8.5 mile slide is still causing issues,
Right.
so that's gonna have to be dealt with.
Right, but that's not part of this.
I would like.
It's on where it is on the map.
8.5 miles from somewhere.
Yeah. It's not 8.5 miles long.
And this is one that, obviously, like the rest of it, is a discussionary item, right? That,
I don't see it discretionary, I think it's a must, we must.
no, in terms of just the rates and who pays for.
So of the 19 miles, we have the 4.4 of the highest risk. What's the remaining 15 miles?
Everything, you got, shotcreted, you got line sections, concrete line sections.
And the
I guess-
picture on the website showed a box flume, that's sitting on the ground, it's not elevated, right? It's where we're nothing, I'm assuming this is all the limit flume around.
I think,
It would be included of all that. This flume number should have that box flume in there as well, yeah.
So my question is, what's the risk level on the rest of the canal?
So, like any earthen canal, or bermed facility, the risk, trees falling, root balls pulling out, slide filling in a spot, it's all out there. Typically when we have just depending on the location, of course, that makes things a little trickier. We can handle a small section of canal that gets damaged. Say we have a blowout where a berm pops out and water shoots out the side and we get it shut off, we can go back in there and repair that, versus trying to like really reinforce all of those miles of canal to be able to withstand most anything. Probably does not make sense in terms of monetary purposes to do that. Unless you truly got rid of them, like install a tunnel.
something happens every year to that canal.
It does.
Well, we have some amount of money, right, that's going into repairs that are unforeseen, that Kean would be.
Yeah, the normal maintenance stuff.
That's out of the operating budget.
Yeah, we're replacing beams that are going bad, et cetera, not replacing whole sections where,
There's an outage done every year, and they go and make those minor repairs, take rotted wood out. There was wood this year that had a bunch of woodpecker holes in it.
yeah.
Originally, estimated $2 million a year just for that, right? So,
Yeah, I don't remember if that was.
like that,
I don't remember the number.
yeah, we talked about it.
This would be doing a larger scale strategic replacement of the highest risk section.
Yeah.
The other money is spent on, it's operational money that is spent on going and fixing this piece of wood, fixing that, the tree fell, whatever happened.
So we have the super high risk, and is everything else a modest?
No, it's not. I don't even know if this 4.4 miles is correct. I don't think that it is. Let us dig back into
Yeah, that
that.
would be useful to have it done.
It's all high risk. I think what this is more looking at is the, elevated section that's up on the wooden trusses, so it's at higher risk from massive failures.
Any flume, right? Wildfire, trees, wildfire, et cetera. Whereas the rest of it is more canal, which still has risk, but it's just a different impact.
I would like to see us have a presentation on the risk analysis.
Yeah, me too.
And I think that was provided before, maybe we just need to dig that back up.
We have the book.
What that report was?
That's what it is.
Yeah, we'll dig it back out.
Yeah, but, you know, in the whole book, it'd be nice to have it summarized, it's like, there's this many miles that are super high risk, you know.
I thought that was done, but we'll bring it back
Maybe
again.
it was.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe.
You can see it from Google Earth, yeah.
So let's see, I think we're almost to the end there. So this is when you add, we have another slide, is that the same slide? Yeah, so this is all three. So what I did here is I just broke out the three large capital projects, which is both in Fund 15 and 55. To give you a feel for those three projects, we're needing $56 million to build those projects. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then the other one is just a summary of it's kind of all the R&Rs put together. That's kind of the money we need. So the 56 is the capital projects, the big capital projects that we need to, yep. That 69 is, if we did the 4 miles of pipe of treated water and a mile of the raw water pipe, and we did the South Yuba Canal, we need to be spending this kind of number. $13 to $14 million a year. So.
This really puts it in.
It's kind of a summary. I think the key was you have this projects that are gonna take a lot of capital. So you guys start thinking how we need to fund those. And then you have this other component, which is we should be replacing our infrastructure, and this is kind of what it would need to do that. That helps also facilitate your rates discussion.
It takes the mystery. Oh, my goodness, we have all this infrastructure repair, and it's just kind of been this cloud.
There's some negatives.
Some hard numbers, I appreciate it.
There's some negatives to being the second largest district in terms of area.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think this is a huge step forward, another example, a step forward, to be able to see this in a larger time frame, identifying our biggest risk areas. It kind of comes to my mind, what we were talking about is the communication side of things. And I did see a posting on Usenet that talked about the South Yuba Canal. It was an excellent story about the vulnerability, why we took it on, the importance of that system to our customers, and why we would take on a system like that, given the vulnerability. So it was extremely well done. And I think this is a whole area where the pre-messaging we can do to help people understand that Lake Wildwood, we can't just leave those people stranded out there without a functioning water treatment plant, you know? And so anyway, I just think the communication effort, I want to encourage that. Susan's doing a great job with that, with Greg and Jennifer.
That article's written, Susan, Greg, guys, excellent article. When do we see 5 to 10 years?
That'll be part of the rate setting process, but I'm not sure when it's gonna come back.
Yeah. I've got plenty of projects on the spreadsheet to fill it out.
We usually do with a larger project so that we can rate smooth, so you're not getting those big jumps at the end of the rate period, but. Yeah.
That's a good word.
I will tell you also a perception that I've heard, which I've tried to correct, but the feeling that NID has let all of the maintenance go, that we're not doing maintenance on a regular basis, and all of a sudden the current ratepayers are having to pay for and being penalized for kind of
For mistakes past or
Yeah.
not, or ignoring it.
Kicking the can down the road.
Kicking the can.
well, and there may be some truth in that, but it's also that the infrastructure is aging, and we're coming to a point where, you know, that has to be the focus. It's not that we haven't spent money on supporting the infrastructure. Things are accelerating, particularly when you talk about kind of a culmination of the South Yuba Canal, Scotts Flat, Chicago Park Rewind, those examples, so it happens.
Yeah, and you also have, you know, a lot of our treated water systems all kind of went in at the same time in the late 60s and 70s, right? So they're all kind of aging at the same time, and some of our raw water infrastructure was all done back, you know, some of it even before the district was formed. And so, you know, those things are all aging all at the same time. It's not like they're being nice and doing it in a very stepwise fashion so that we can continue to replace them.
That's
Yeah.
Don't forget, of the 5 years, over 40% was regulatory. A choice. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. Giver. So,
I don't have a lot to report. That hasn't already been touched on. We had a wonderful time at the Nevada County Farm Bureau tour. So we greatly appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak at that event. We have a couple of other events coming up this week. I think Mr. Jones has something tonight.
Yeah, Lake of the Pines.
Lake of the Pines tonight, and I'm doing the Nevada County Contractors Association tomorrow.
Is that at lunchtime or?
No, it's in the afternoon.
had Surge yesterday.
SIRS, yes. We love our SIRS friends.
Fantastic.
SIRS is fun.
Make a good lunch.
You have a great lunch.
That's it. Yeah. Excellent. So, director's comments? Let's start.
Beaches are coming in.
Yeah, they are.
Get to the stands.
That's my report. That video report this afternoon.
I don't.
I do.
I was at the Nevada County Farm Bureau tour, and I just would like to recognize Debbie for the good work that you did in putting that on. It was a really great program, learned a lot about our local agriculture up front, and I really enjoyed that a lot, so thank you so much.
You know, I also went to the Farm Bureau tour, and I echo, Debbie, thank you so much. The organization that it took to put all those people together, and then in the last minute when the bus didn't show up, and then you had to scramble, and you know, and you made it like it was easy and flawless, and thank you. I learned so much, and I was especially just blown away at the Weiss Brothers Nursery. Well, it was not only fun, but it was my goodness, those two people plant, was number 45,000 plants a year between January 20th and June 20th. They were remarkable and all by hand seeded. I was just blown out. Just like, oh my gosh. Anyway, that was fun and I learned so much. So again, thank you. Appreciate it.
And we got to drink wine. And ice cream afterwards. What a day.
The wine and ice cream.
I know.
Yeah, Chris.
So, I echo all those, the food was the best.
Yeah, the food, the caterers.
yeah.
It was the best.
That was good.
Yeah. They need their name on their trailer.
Yeah, well,
It is on the trailer.
it is on the trailer. They have their neighbors is mine, that their boy works at a restaurant.
Is that right? Excellent.
Yeah. It's really great.
If you ever go to Mark Henry's, winery, no entertainment, he is the entertainment, and it's worth it. Yeah. So, on the tour, had a chance to talk to Aaron and Tracy. Tracy's still online, and talk about micro ponds and the conservation of water, and that's going forward. Get some movement on that. Jennifer, thank you for mentioning it. That's great. So I talked about, and the ag tour was incredible, best ever. I talked about the monitoring on the Russian River and how it's coming for reporting purposes. Something did come out of our pond thing. This is a stainless steel magnet, $400 unit for a 3/4 inch hose. And what it does is saves water and energy by disrupting the minerals in the water. It makes water wetter. So guys are using bigger 6-inch, 8-inch, bigger irrigation systems are telling us that they're saving 20% on their water. They're using 20% less water to irrigate their crops. So either they can grow more, in this case, a lot of these bigger guys are selling their 20% water and paying for the system. We're going to try it out on down in Penn Valley, 3/4 inch. What it does is the water, with no charge, just goes right on through the ground into the soil and irrigates beautifully. And these guys, I heard of these guys 25 years ago, then nothing. But it took off, and they don't have to advertise. And they're doing quite well with the bigger growers. So we're going to test this. We could put it on like a one line of maybe 150 feet long, 20 feet wide, and see if it gets wetter faster than the other lines that are more calcified. And we'll find out really quick whether it works or not. And then if it does, we can get a 4-inch, put it on our intake valve. It's gonna cost a few thousand, but what the 4-inch will then take it through the pump, take it through the filtration, and the whole place will be irrigated with this type of water. But according to the guy who's been using this for a long time, it works.
That's totally cool.
Yeah.
How often do you have to replace
hear
it?
about the experiment.
How often do you have to replace it?
You don't. Just, they're magnets.
Works in purpose.
You have to
Yeah.
clean it?
No, evidently. And the other uptake thing that was really interesting was that they run seeds through that. And after 4 times, it cracks the seed. So they're getting, maybe they used to get 85, 86% germination. Now they're getting 100%, 99.9% germination on the seeds because it does something to their seed. And it's a dry peat. So anyway, just wanted to share this and see how it works. That's all I have. Public comment on items to be considered in closed session. Do we have a readout?
I expect a readout
You do?
concerning a claim.
Oh, yes, that's
Turn
right.
that on Zoom, correct? That on Zoom?
Yeah, the readout will be reflected in the minutes.
Okay. So we're going to close the open session, take a 5, come back at 10 to 12, and we'll open the closed session. Is that enough time, Chris?